And here we go. Welcome in to another edition of Bucky and BK. Today is Wednesday, August 12th, 2026. And the Buck and I are not with you for the next 2 hours. It's another load management day for the Buck. Really, he's just so upset that his Minnesota Vikings announced that Kyler Murray is their new starting quarterback, so he felt the need to take a day, maybe even a couple of days off. But joining me in his stead, one of our favorites, a frequent guest on Bucky and BK, and a guy who's co-hosted with me before from Inside Texas, InsideTexas.com, and the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, the great Evan Vieth with me on a Wednesday. Evan, what's going on, man? Appreciate the time.
Not much. I was expecting a Bucky looks different comment in the chat, so I appreciate that from you guys. But I didn't know he was a Vikings fan. That's a harsh last year into my opinion on that was like, why were they even drawing it out? Like, let's just name Kyler the starter and get it over with. We know JJ is not any good.
Yeah, man. Bucky's a fan of some weird sports teams. So he grew up in Pennsylvania. So you would think he'd like either all the Philly teams or all the Pittsburgh teams. But his favorite NFL team is the Vikings. His favorite baseball team is the Yankees. He does like the Sixers. He's not the biggest NBA guy in the world, but at least he likes one local team. And I guess the Flyers are his favorite NHL team, although I don't think he's watched a hockey game in 50 years. So he's got the Minnesota, which is like the worst team to root for in the NFL. Historically, the Yankees are the best team to root for, but obviously they've fallen on some harder times by their standards. Yeah, I don't know how he came across the four teams.
Combination.
Yeah, and he went to Boston College, so he roots for them, and he coached at Illinois and Texas, so he's got a random assortment of teams that he roots for. But yeah, he of course, none of us like Kyler Murray very much from his time at Oklahoma, so I know he's hurting from that announcement yesterday. But yeah, obviously a tough NFL season for Minnesota. So we'll get into some NFL conversation perhaps as the show goes on. But of course, plenty of Longhorn chatter as we sit now 24 days away from kickoff, Texas and Texas State. Obviously, fall camp is in full swing. The pads have officially come on, Evan. We've got the first scrimmage of the fall coming up on Saturday. So much to dive into. And I guess just to start here, biggest takeaways, biggest themes so far from Texas in fall camp. We'll kind of deep dive. We'll talk position battles. We'll talk about players. I want to get into your thoughts on Arch Manning. You put out a great article the other day talking about 4 Longhorns who need to step up now that the pads are coming on. So there's plenty to dive into. But just for you, is there a theme that has really stood out over the first now, I guess, 6 practices that the Longhorns have had in training camp?
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian kind of stole the show with this take, but definitely when I was there in person, felt that physicality factor that he was talking about. And I really do think it stems from the coaching staff. And, having Will Muschamp there now, completely different dynamic. I mean, it's nothing against PK, but CB's everywhere. We love CB. It's nothing against what Pete Kwiatkowski would do, but Muschamp's just a louder, more vocal guy. And he's also a little bit more, I think, benefit of the media that he's super ingrained with the defensive backs. So he's really front and center when we're having these practice availabilities. The D-line and edge room's kind of over in this corner, but the corners are right in front of us and the nickels and the safeties. And you're just feeling that from Will Muschamp. And that really translates with Jabbar Jalouk as the running back coach. Special teams with Jeff Banks is always a thud patter or a pad thudder kind of environment. But I think you're hearing it more with the defensive group. And that's translated into, what we haven't been able to see with our eyes, but hearing from reports from what our Eric Naline's been talking about on Inside Texas, that the D-line is just really, really good and it's dominating. And there is some zero sum to it that we've discussed. Where like, if the D-line's playing super well this early on, what does that say about the O-line? What does that maybe say about tight end blocking? What does it say about the run game? You can take it however you want. The most pessimistic way is probably, I don't like that means the left guard's not playing well. Best way you can take it is, this is probably the deepest Texas D-line Steve Sarkisian's had, and might be the best one they've had since, I would say 09, but probably 08 even. Like that was when they had, Melton and Ocho and I believe not Jeff Cope, but Rockpo was playing as like an All-American Nagurski level player. So you have that kind of player in Colin Simmons, but we're hearing about a Justice Terry breakout. That was one that I expected to come, but I didn't think it would be happening within a week, BK, of like this domination from him in practice so far. And that's before we into some of the role players like January and Gaffard and Murad Watson, Zeno Umozolo. So those probably two things, the physicality and the D-line excellence so far.
Yeah, well, let's go in that order because physicality was mentioned a lot by Steve Sarkisian in his post-practice availability on Monday. I think he used the word physicality or toughness 13 times in a 20-minute press conference. And Sark has talked about this since he's gotten here, Evan. You get what you emphasize as a head coach. So I don't think he's just telling the press one thing and he's telling his team something completely different. It feels like to me, and Texas had all sorts of problems in 2025, but, Sark and his self-audit that he did this offseason, he obviously talked about culture and, I felt like we didn't start our culture work early enough last offseason. To me, it's also, and I don't know if he's explicitly said this, but it's also like, he didn't think his team was tough enough last year. He didn't think mentally tough, physically tough, just physical in general. It seems pretty obvious that is a point that he is trying to drill home. And I mean, I hope it works because I think you need physicality to get through the schedule that the Longhorns have this season.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was to blame for him, like individually, mostly as a roster builder. I mean, this thing I've talked about before, a lot of critique of Steve Sarkisian from last year seemed to have gone more to like the coaching side of things. I think his GM work was pretty poor, and that's why the team wasn't as tough and should have been instilling the culture. It kind of felt like a no duh when he brought it up after the season, like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be waiting until June when you just bring in a bunch of transfers and every freshman's early enrolling. So at least like it feels like he's gotten back to the baseline of what you need to do as a head coach there. But you're right, he does preach what is done in practice to the media, and generally we get that, and you notice when things are left out. And so I mentioned on Inside Texas that this is probably exactly what you want to hear. Like, you want your coach to come out and say, I've been most impressed by the physicality and toughness of my team. And you're right. Like, we use Otter a lot, the transcription system, and you control F that, and physical, it's about 15 times it shows up there. So he did repeat it a lot, but it doesn't come with like baseless claim to it. I love what he said about the tone setters, BK. Like, he named about 12 guys who are like, these are the players on the defense who are setting the tone for the practice. And so that then comes with, defenses usually start the camp better because it's more about stopping, the offenses need to go get it, whereas the defense just need to keep them at bay. And so we expect the defense to start out better. The offense needs to get there. But I like what he said about the players who are kind of bringing it. I think Justin Cryer was mentioned in that, which that's a name that's kind of been blowing up a little bit recently, even though he's kind of a fifth-year senior, not the kind of guy that you expect to get a lot of buzz. But you like hearing that from Steve Sarkisian. So I do think, there's certain other things that you're hoping to hear him emphasize. I think finding the left guard spot is clearly one of them. The penalties, he keeps having to be asked about how they're coaching penalties. And I'd like someday, BK, for him to go up on the stand and bring it up himself in a positive way. Like, have we ever heard him say out of a fall camera practice, like, I was really happy that we weren't committing infractions. Maybe I'm nitpicking here, but that needs to be something that they coach better. And hopefully with a reshuffled staff, it helps a little bit. But that's always a core problem that not physicality doesn't fix that. Like, that's a technique thing. It's a confidence thing from players. And I'd hope that would change. But I do love what I've heard from Sarkisian so far.
Hey, you are filling the role of Bucky today, Evan, because I think Bucky harps on the penalty problem maybe more than any other member of the media that covers the Texas Longhorns. And shout out to you guys. Bucky and I are too lazy to show up to these events, and I don't think they invite us. They don't even want us around anyways. But you guys, like, asking about the penalties repeatedly because it's been a problem around here the last 3 years. Obviously, last year, the worst of the entire Steve Sarkisian era, but I'm glad that's one of those wait and see things, Evan, right? The head coach could say, yeah, no, we're holding guys accountable. We're making entire position groups run if one person screws something up. We're changing the way we approach things in practice. But ultimately, I mean, I think Texas had in the game against San Jose State last year, obviously Ohio State was the opener, but week 2, you're playing a scrub. You got the game at home. Like, you're bounce back, clean things up, look sharp game against a super inferior opponent. If memory serves, Texas had 12 penalties for 115 yards in that game. And it just kind of went all downhill. I think of the 13 games Texas played, they tied or won the penalty battle in just 2 of them. So that's something like the margins are so thin with this team that has national championship goals and aspirations this year. They're going to be playing a lot of close games during the regular year. Sometimes the team that wins is the team that doesn't shoot itself in the foot as much. So that's one of those things. I will, get back to the physicality and some of the standouts in a moment, but that's such a big freaking deal. And I agree with you 100%. I'd love Sark to come out and be like, man, we've gone 3 straight practices without committing a penalty. That would make me feel a lot better about things.
Well, it feels like there's kind of 3 core things that when you think of Steve Sarkisian's this awesome offensive mind, and every game you see it with his play calling. Shout out Tyler, my new co-writer. He's been absolutely killing it, by the way, on Inside Texas.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you haven't thrown him over a follow, was on the Notre Dame beat this past few years. But there's kind of 3 things where you're like, Steve Sarkisian is this unreal offensive mind, but with what it is. And I think the first is, of course, penalties, and that's something that we just need to hear better about. And I think he was asked when we were at the Texas High School Coaches Association about penalties, and he was like, yeah, we're kind of trying a new punishment system, and punishment doesn't sound like the right word to use when talking about college football players. Maybe 20 years ago you could get away with that, but there needs to be something that I was glad to at least hear it was different, because that's one of the things that needs to change. Red zone efficiency clearly needs to change. I mean, that is something that he's struggled with since the day he got to Texas, and it kind of wasn't a big problem as pass stops. And I think it might be a roster construction thing with the running backs. Like after Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, he hasn't had the guys to just hammer it in, and Arch Manning can't just be a bowling ball Sam Ehlinger every time. So that's another one where you're like, I want to hear good things about it because I know I have to be wary of it. And then generally, like, third down, third and long, like, you'd think that it would be better, but it feels like sometimes he needs the perfect group around his quarterback to get that done. And third downs weren't great last year. And there were times where it was kind of Arch Manning magic, but how are they doing in these actual team drill systems? He talked about the run, I believe it's free run or whatever exactly they call it. And people misinterpret it a lot, but this certain I guess format, they either run the ball or they play action. Those are the only 2 things they're allowed to do. And they ran it 16 straight times, and Hollywood Smothers played really well on it. And that's what you want to hear. That's how you avoid those third down problems. That's how you stay ahead of penalties. But I need to hear a little bit more about red zone. I need to hear a little bit more about long third down playmaking and things like that, because it just seems like those are always the ones that come up, BK, when it comes to failures, either individual games with Sark or kind of whole season problems. So, yeah, you hear what you hear from Sark is generally truthful. It's what you're going to get from the team. You could kind of read between the tea leaves last year about the O-line, starting to read it a little bit right now about left guard, but I want to hear him speak highly of his team in these aspects.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you look at some of the numbers from the 2025 Texas Longhorns, and you kind of scratch your head and wonder how the hell they were able to win 10 games. And I'm not trying to make the point that it was a successful season. Obviously, everyone's disappointed going from preseason number 1 to not even reaching the college football playoff. But yeah, the red zone stats, the penalty numbers, the run game numbers, there are a lot of things that did not go well for Texas. And obviously, if they do want to get back into the CFP and more importantly, make a run in the CFP, they've got to clean up. So I want to get into that, though, Evan. You brought up the offensive line versus the defensive line and the net zero that happens in practice. And you always have to be careful when talking about these training camps because, yeah, you want to get excited, but also, well, if one position group is performing really well, then the one opposite that is maybe not performing so well. So I guess best case scenario is there are good days and bad days for just about everybody. But the offensive and defensive line conversation, again, you brought it up earlier, glass half full. Texas has one of the best defensive lines in the country. That's great. You need that to win at a high level. The glass half empty and maybe glass half shattered at this point because of what happened last year is, here we go again. So it's early. Again, the pads are just starting to come on. There's plenty of time. I know I say that. It's close, but you still have a number of practices between now and the first game of the season. But where are you at? Are you going glass half full like this D-line is really good, or are you still – man, I don't really know what Texas has on its offensive line right now?
I will stick to half full for one specific reason right now. It's that I do generally think that Lawrence Seymour will just win the left guard spot. And that's kind of, it's going to get there eventually. You really can't fully diagnose offensive line without the pads on, which I believe tonight was the night where, or last night, was the night where they started fully pad popping, put them on ahead of the scrimmage on Saturday. So it's a little harder to see what you've got at O-line before that. And I do think Texas this year more than last year just knows who their 4 are going to be. Like, there's not much question about left tackle, center, right guard, right tackle. And you don't want to hear that there's 5 options at left guard a week before practice, or excuse me, week before the season. That means that you don't have an option at left guard. You don't want to hear that position being rotated. But remember that Seymour was like a late enrollee. He was the only one of this group of the real contributors on this team who didn't show up in the spring. So he missed that set of practice, and he was mostly just focusing on weight room in the summer. So there was always going to be a ramp-up period for him. I think clearly the staff knows, like, we can't do what we did last year and hope with our guys. Like, let's put out proven production if we have to put out something that doesn't feel great, that we don't feel awesome about. So that's where I do think that Seymour, just in a week and a half time, we're going to kind of go, oh, why were we so upset? Like, why were we so scared about this? Like, left guard was always going to be his spot. He was an All-American on one of the sites. Like, that's how it's going to be. But it does concern me right now, Bucky, a little bit, that we're still talking about 4 or 5 guys like Jackson Christian, a true sophomore, who he'll have a good career as a Longhorn, shouldn't be the starting left guard this year, the same way Connor Stroh shouldn't have been the starting left guard last year. So they do have a lot of options, and I do think the O-line depth is better than last season, but I don't want to have to hear a week before the season starts that, like, oh, Andre Kojo just had a good practice repping with the ones after Dylan Sikorsky was doing it the week before, and Lawrence Seymour we thought had the spot, and now he doesn't. That's where I'm going to be full glasses cracking. Like, I'm going to fade the Longhorns a little bit into the season if we're talking like that a week before.
Yeah, I remember last year going into week 1, obviously that Ohio State game, it felt like for most of training camp, it was Neto Umeozulu who was like the guy. And then all of a sudden, like 4 days before the Ohio State game, it's Connor Stroh is the guy. And it's like, who is this guy? Like, what's going on? Why do we not have this figured out? And for Texas in 2025, they didn't have that position figured out until game 8 of the season. So yeah, they've got to get it done. We can't be playing musical chairs up front that late into the season this time around. And I guess I'll just ask you point blank, Evan, like, would it be a disappointment? No disrespect to Sikorsky and Chapman and Kojo. Like you said, these guys have bright futures as Longhorns. They're going to have roles. You need depth up front. So if you don't get a starting job, it doesn't mean you can't play a role on this team. But even with Cole Hudson back, in your eyes, would it be a disappointment if Lawrence Seymour isn't good enough to edge out all of those guys?
Yeah, definitely. It would mean that you just didn't do enough in the portal, frankly. Like, I think Seymour was a good addition. I think it worked. I'm not going to go back on that take, but if he is incapable of doing that, then it meant that you needed to do something different in the portal. And we said that last year about the offensive line, and we said that last year about left guard. And this team is so expensive, and this is so the year for Texas that it had to be correct. And so if it doesn't end up being correct, and I probably am on the side of it's okay if Cole Hudson is there, okay, being the emphasis. Like, if that does end up being who is taken there, Texas was good in the 4 games that Hudson was playing there. The O-line held up. It's going to be better than it was last year with Siani there, and I think Baker a year extra. Gooseby Robertson, the same thing. But it would be a disappointment. I don't think that's crazy to say.
Yeah. So this defensive line, right? Again, it sounds like they have dominated the early parts of practice. Justice Terry's the guy that everyone keeps talking about. And, I was having dinner with someone last night, and he's like, well, yeah, shouldn't Justice Terry be starting? Like, he's a 5-star in year 2. Like, why is it a big surprise that this guy is anytime you see it for the first time, I guess it's a bit of a storyline. But, I go back to the play last year in the A&M game, end of the season, right? 4th quarter, close game. We know what was at stake, and Justice Terry's on the field, and he's the guy who got interior pressure on Marcel Reed that led to the Michael Taff interception. That was almost a dagger in that Longhorns victory on Black Friday. So for me, it's like that guy being on the field in that spot tells me the coaches like him a lot. And obviously that guy making a play in that spot against a really good A&M offensive line last year tells me that there's something there. But like Justice Terry, y'all have been all over this on Inside Texas. It feels like everyone's been talking about him, maybe the standout of camp. Is it crazy to think that, like, and I know Kenny Baker rotates these guys, so being a starter is not as big of a deal there as it is on pretty much any other spot on the team. But is it crazy to think that Justice Terry could be a starting defensive tackle when the Longhorns take the field 3 weeks from Saturday?
I think it would be very surprising if he's the first one trotted out and if he leads the group in snaps when we're talking about, Texas leading the group against Texas State, maybe not, but Ohio State is really what I think of as like the first real game that we're talking about here, just because, a play style thing. Ohio State you remember last year, I mean, they ran the ball a lot in 12 personnel. I mean, that was their game plan. They knew the way to beat Texas was going to be controlling the clock of that game and letting Sain's job be easy. But they added more tight ends again. They love doing that in the portal. Experienced blocking tight ends. They have Arthur Smith as their OC. They are going to try to run the ball, get Jeremiah Smith on the outside with safeties down on the box, and work from there. Chris Henry as well. So they're going to need Ian Gaffard in the game. Alex January. I mean, don't forget how many snaps Alex January played last year. Murad Watson was also kind of a quasi-starter on this team. I had a tweet that I pointed it out. Like they have like 4 different interior guys who logged 300-plus snaps last year. So Terry not only has to be like really, really good in camp, but also overtake those guys at those spots. So I think there's more known with January and Watson and Gaffard and obviously Hiro Kanu in early downs that I don't think he'll start. I do think generally that he is just going to be the starter or at least the highest snap guy by week 7, week 8, maybe post OU. He's just so talented, so explosive. The pass rush just has a different dynamic when you have that kind of player in the game. So any time that I'm seeing a team in 2nd and 7 or deeper, I want Justice Terry on the field because that's just D-line interior rush is one of the hardest things to find in college football. But when you get it paired with how kind of poor interior offensive line is generally in the sport, it just wreaks so much havoc. And especially when you can line up Simmons on one side and then have Jackson and Terry next to each other on the other. Like, how do you stop that? Where do you put your bodies? Where do you put your focus? How do you slide your line? I do think by the end of the year, we're talking about this being the starter for the team, starting in a playoff game potentially. But week 2, there's going to be a lot of Texas keeping it to what they know and what is clear about their roster. And so maybe not a ton of Jermaine Bishop and Derek Cooper. You lean on the veterans in the offense. Maybe not a ton of Justice Terry or Tyler Atkinson. Maybe get a few plays, just kind of run and get the ball. But they'll keep it a little bit easier there. And then as the season goes on, that's where you're going to see a lot more of Terry truly becoming a starter on the team.
Yeah, Justice Terry 6th on the Texas defensive line in snaps last year, but obviously as a true freshman, and he was in a very, very crowded room. Expect those numbers to go up this year, and what an opportunity to introduce yourself, not only to Longhorn Nation, but to the college football world in that week 2 game. He's got to play. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to start. I don't think he'll be top 2 in snaps for defensive tackles for Texas in that matchup against the Buckeyes. But, what an opportunity for him. And now, the Longhorns have been looking for a Byron Murphy since Byron Murphy left. I know it hasn't been that long, but I go back to that 2023 Texas defensive line, which is up there for the best Longhorn defensive lines that I've seen in my life. And obviously you had Tavondre Sweat, who was awesome. But I think the difference maker and the reason that group was so good was because you had that interior pass rush from Byron Murphy, who's obviously doing that now for the Seattle Seahawks, a big part of their Super Bowl winning defense this past year. That guy was such a difference maker. And if Justice Terry can be 80% of that by the time his Longhorn career is over, then like you said, that's going to make life easier for Colin Simmons and Lance Jackson and all of these edge guys that Texas has. And that 2023 defense, that secondary was not very good. They were just so damn good up front that they were able to win the Big 12 and make the 4-team CFP. You get something like that from a pass rush perspective from a guy like Justice Terry, then that's going to make Will Muschamp's job a lot easier.
I'll also remember with that 23 group, because that was kind of the one I was comparing it to, best of the Sark era. Clearly that's the number one, but the edge rush room was not very good that year.
No.
I mean, it was Burke and Sorrell who were good players, but and Sorrell in particular was a year away from being really good. But that was a young Ethan Burke, and then kind of no one else. When you think about the best pass rushers on the team the next year, it was Sorrell, but then it was a transfer Trey Moore and a freshman Colin Simmons. So that was a clear weakness on that defense. And that's why, I mean, Byron Murphy, if you remember that Washington game, Murphy was dominating in the trenches. I think that game helped him get drafted in the top 20. But there wasn't a lot of guys hooking around on Michael Penix. And there was a lot of just kind of pushing the pocket in this way instead of these loopers like you get with Colin Simmons. And so that's where I think the difference is between these two. If Justice Terry, like you're mentioning, has a little bit of that Byron Murphy pass rush in him, with Kanu, with Gaffard, kind of filling in the gaps as well as the rest of the guys. And then you got Colin Simmons. That's where it could really, really stand out as the best of the Longhorn Steve Sarkisian era.
Yeah. All right. We'll continue that. I love that thought. I want to keep the defensive line conversation going. I want to ask about Lance Jackson in a moment and just that other edge opposite of Colin Simmons. Evan Vieth of Inside Texas and InsideTexas.com filling in for the Buck today. Y'all make sure to subscribe over to Inside Texas if you haven't done so already. Check out the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel as well. I'm going to give some sponsor shout-outs in a moment, Evan, but what's Joe Cook's deal? I mean, are you kidding me? The guy's just going to leave like that to go to law school? Who does he think he is? Like Johnny Cochran? What is this guy doing?
You know, it was always funny, BK. Whenever we had to write about like litigation and law stuff with the NCAA, I was like, man, Joe is really good at this. Like, why does he know all these phrases so well? Come to know, he's going to leave us pretty soon. He had it in the back of his mind. It was, you know, all this talk about it, court injunctions was just getting him going. That he had to go out to Houston and get a degree. But no, we're going to miss Joe dearly. What a tremendous Longhorn coverage.
Yeah.
Great guy as always. I mean, you guys know I'm pretty young, so someone who really helped shape who I've become as a writer early on in my career. So we love Joe. Wish he wasn't leaving us, but you know, Tyler was in the chat earlier. He's a great beat writer, and you guys are gonna like him a lot if you follow along Inside Texas.
Yeah, Joe was the Evan Vieth before Evan Vieth. Like that makes me feel old because Joe and I are the same age. We were friends. We were journalism majors together at Texas, and we got into the beat at the same time, and he's got me questioning what the hell I'm still doing here. No, I'm just kidding.
They would call me Little Joe. Like Baby Joe.
Baby Joe. Yeah. Shout out to Joe if he's tuned in today. Great guy, and of course, wishing him the best of luck. All right, before we get back into the Longhorn football chatter, a couple of sponsor shout outs to get to. We'll start with the word from Audio Visual Consultations. I think it's pretty clear to those of you tuned in video-wise this morning that I am not at my place. I'm at a hotel in Vancouver, British Columbia. Despite that, Tom McKay and his crew at AV Consultations came out to my new place yesterday and installed a bunch of TVs. So I am set up, ready to go, and that's going to be so great to walk back into when I return home. Is all the TVs mounted, everything looking great. And I don't know everything that Tom did, but he told me he gave me some upgrades this time around. So, look, he's the first guy I call whenever I move places. He should be the first guy you call, whether you're moving or if you just want to upgrade your sports watching experience. We're just a couple of weeks away. 2 weeks from Saturday, we will have college football. You got week 0 coming up 2 weeks from Saturday. Make sure you make the call to Audio Visual. Get on the schedule. Upgrade your home TV setup. 512-255-8678. Or you can go to avconsultations.com. They do surround sound. They got the Sonos sound equipment as well. Big screens, home theater rooms. They do it all. It's Audio Visual Consultations. Shout out to them. And also some love to our friends at Roger Beasley Mazda, the #1 Mazda dealer in the state of Texas. Roger Beasley Mazda South, a beautiful showroom off of I-35, just south of Highway 71. Fantastic people who work there, a legendary service department. And if y'all haven't checked out these new Mazdas, these vehicles are incredible. I've been driving around the all-new 2026 CX-5, a gorgeous SUV, super luxurious feel. Obviously, you've got the world-famous safety and reliability that comes with Mazda. But, man, check out their new model. Take it for a test drive at Roger Beasley Mazda South. Their customer service is as good as it gets. 30 straight Mazda President's Club awards. These are the guys and gals you want to see when it's time to buy a car. And, of course, they do trade-ins as well. Check them out, Roger Beasley Mazda South. And also some love to SendTextTickets.com. Again, college football and NFL season right around the corner. If you want to attend any Longhorn game, any Cowboys game, any Texans game, any football game this fall, SendTex Tickets is the place to go for your seats. Don't forget to use the promo code SendTex10. You type that in at checkout. You're going to get 10% off of any ticket purchase, whether you're buying one, whether you're buying for the whole family. It does not matter. SendTex10, the promo code, the website, SendTexTickets.com. All right, Evan Vieth of Inside Texas and InsideTexas.com joining me here on a Wednesday. So back into the Texas defensive line conversation, Evan, and it sounds like that's one of your biggest reasons for optimism for this Longhorn bunch going into the 2026 season. I think for me, and I think probably for a lot of people, the biggest question with the Texas defensive line is who is going to emerge opposite Colin Simmons. We know how good Colin Simmons is. I think he's the best defensive player in college football. He's a freaking monster. The numbers he's put up over his first 2 years are incredible, and I can't wait to see what he does in a Will Muschamp defense. We could talk all about him if we wanted to, but there's no question about him. There is a question about who the other guy's going to be. You mentioned Lance Jackson first last segment. Former five-star going into year 2, kind of a similar conversation with Justice Terry in that regard. You've got Zeno Meozulu or Amozolo, or however we're pronouncing it this week. You've got Colton Vasek. There's some names there, but obviously not a lot of proven with Ethan Burke departing for the NFL. How are you feeling, and what do you think that battle is looking like and going to end up looking like in training camp?
Yeah, I do think that we're looking at mostly a two-headed monster here with kind of a good problem to have. It's either Jackson, who he outsnapped Zena last year. I think he had about 60 more snaps, both over 200 in their 2025 season. So you're talking about a guy who outsnapped another player and was a 5-star, was a true freshman last year. That's probably the guy you're going to lean on a little bit more. Jackson was always a good athlete, but he's now up from 6'5", 260 to 6'5", 272. I think that fits what you want with the Will Muschamp system more. And I also think that's more of his natural position as true D end, as opposed to another jack on the edge compared to what was, I believe, the Will or whatever they were calling it exactly with Kwiatkowski. I'm now on the Muschamp language now, but I think he's more of a hand in the dirt D end than he was a stand up edge rusher. So I think it both fits him a little better. And I think the nice thing with Zena is that he doesn't really need to start there, but he'll rotate plenty with Jackson because they have similar skill sets. Zena's motor is tremendous. I mean, that's what always sticks out to me is the OU game when both of them were getting a lot of snaps, just consistently moving and keeping himself in these plays. And that's where his athleticism really pops. But he's also going to be one of the primary backups to Simmons, which I think matters a lot here, that he can do both the roles well, where I do think that Jackson outsnaps him, but it will be so close because the few snaps you have Simmons off, a lot of that will go to Zena, and some of that will be Richard Wesley for Simmons's plays. If Simmons needs some rest in a series and you're in a passing down, Wesley can come in and kind of do what Simmons did as a true freshman. I think if this roster is a little less loaded, you would see Richard Wesley playing a lot as an edge rusher, but that's not a regular 17-year-old going out there in pads and how he looks coming off the bus when we watch him practice. So keep an eye out for him. Vasek's going to play for sure, more of a role player, early down guy. But I do think we're talking about Jackson being that number one of a 1A, 1B, and Zena helping out kind of everywhere in the package. And I'm looking forward, BK, to that third down rush package. How does that look? Are they going to be running in dime with maybe Simmons, Zena, Jackson, Kanu? Does Terry come in for that? That's the one that really excites me. The Muschamp defense on third down, where you're able to drop back 6 defensive backs and rush just your 4 best pass rushers. How can you expect to get a first down on that?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to block for sure. And are you worried about depth at all with the edge room? You mentioned a lot of names there, but you think Texas has enough there? If somebody goes down with an injury or if one of those guys doesn't perform, you still feel like that group can be a strength on this football team?
Yeah, if Colin Simmons goes down, your team's very different. But I'm not worried about having bodies to replace him. I think that's arguably the position I think D-line's position I'm least worried about having depth kind of ruin the season if players go down. I think that's probably the best room for it.
Yeah, fascinated to see. I mean, Texas just needs somebody, whether it's a Justice Terry, whether it's a Lance Jackson or a Zena. I mean, obviously you'd prefer it to be 2, 3, 4 of those somebodies who steps up and provides a really consistent pass rush. But obviously Colin Simmons is going to attract so much attention. You'd like other guys to be able to win their one-on-one. So teams can't just double Colin Simmons on every single pass rushing snap. And also I think a big question, I feel like Bucky and I have talked to you about this, Evan. Correct me if I'm wrong. What about the run defense, right? Everybody focuses on pass rush statistics and sacks and pressures when we're talking about. Colin Simmons has proven to be a very good run defender. I thought that was an area of his game that stepped up in a big way from his first season to his second season. I feel like a lot of teams are going to test Lance Jackson or Zena or whoever that other edge is to see if they're good enough. Are you time will tell. We still have a few weeks of practice. Again, the pads are just coming on, but is that a concern or a question for you, or do you think Texas will still be just fine there?
It's really not, and maybe it's some blind confidence here, but I truly think that the single best thing that this Texas team has is a defensive line and a pass coverage that is going to make it hard to throw the ball. I think teams are going to have to do a lot of running at one of the defensive ends and thinking all right, well, Texas might not have quite the Mike linebacker, that the super traditional SEC 6'3", 255, good athlete that can dominate the run game. So let's try to hit a zone on the outside and test Simmons. But remember when Florida tested Simmons on one drive, and that was kind of the only drive where they weren't productive all season. Yeah. And Simmons really stepped up as a run defender this past season. And I mean, Jackson, that's kind of what they brought him in for. I mean, he's going to rush the passer, but as a big man with long arms, same with Zena. So I dare teams to kind of test those guys out. I think a lot of what needs to be done to beat that defense is running when Gaffard's not in the field and passing when Cryer is maybe the one in coverage a lot, and seeing if he can keep up with the best tight ends in the SEC, or trying to get the running back out in the flat and have he or Biles tackle. But I just think this is a really well-constructed defense, BK, and maybe went a little under the radar because I think most of the national attention was, well, Arch Manning now has the weapons. But, Texas lost 3 really important players in the defense, but only, Taff was really good, but not irreplaceable. And I think Hill, you replace him with Biles. Muhammad, you replace him with Nasco in the portal. And I'm like, suddenly it's just kind of the same group, but it's gotten a year older and kind of a year better in general.
Obviously a new defensive coordinator too with Will Muschamp, but I think Texas fans very confident from his first stint in Austin that they've got the right guy coordinating the defense. Well, going back to the linebackers, Evan, and I brought this up earlier, you recently posted an article on IT about the 4 players who have the most to gain, I think was the word that you used in padded practice. And one of those guys was Anthony Smith. And, we'll talk about Raheem Biles in a moment, but I just feel like after last season, after the Michigan game, with the way Anthony Smith played, coupled with the fact that Anthony Hill and Trey Moore and Leon Galafau were all leaving the program, it was like, oh, Anthony Smith is maybe your number 1 linebacker. And then obviously you get Raheem Biles out of the portal, and then it's like, okay, well, Anthony Smith is still your number 2 linebacker. But obviously he gets hurt. He has off-season surgery, misses the spring, and Texas went out, brought in a couple of other linebackers. They signed 3 really good ones in their freshman class as well. And now all of a sudden it feels like Anthony Smith is fighting for a starting job. Now, he wasn't a starter last year, still had a big role. So it's like the guy's going to play. There's no doubt about that. But it feels like, and you wrote it, he's got a lot to gain, and he's in a big-time position battle to be a starter for this defense against Texas State, but also against Ohio State too.
I think it's less on Smith, really, than it is on Cryer showing up and being better than what people thought. Because, I mean, think about it. If you went down a list of players you thought would pop off a list on the Texas roster when it came to spring and fall camp, Cryer is probably like 40th on your list. You're like, he's just kind of brought in as a sub linebacker. But you saw in the spring game, for anyone who was there, like, he was running stride for stride with Texas tight ends, covering down the seam, not being caught out. And that's kind of what you were concerned about. This is an older, slower linebacker. Is he going to be able to play in pass coverage? And so he's kind of checked every box. And I'm forgetting the exact quote, but Sarkisian was super, super complimentary. Like, that's a football player's football player kind of talk with Justin Cryer, Juice Cryer. So it's more that he was playing so well while Smith wasn't playing. So now you kind of have to give the player that was doing that, the veteran, their flowers and say, all right, you're still the Mike linebacker. Smith has to earn that back. And what it might end up being, BK, is just Smith plays Mike on the passing downs, Cryer plays it on the rushing downs, and there's kind of a rotation. If Biles needs a rest, and they're going to have Cryer and Smith there. But, it's also, don't forget how he ended the season, right? 2 picks against Michigan. Some super athletic plays, was basically playing like every snap of that game, it felt like, and was really, really good. And my point in this article, and kind of the general idea, is players who have been on the sideline a lot need to show up here when the pads are out, when there's actual football being played. And so Smith needs to show his capability as a run defender. I mean, he can play the pass, but there were times last year where he would just kind of get clung to a guard, and that was that, and he wasn't able to shed through it. So can he show some capability as a run defender? Then we might be back to talking in a week or two about him being the starting Mike linebacker. Again, it's more on someone else playing well than I think Smith playing poorly, but he's definitely someone I'm looking out for. Like, is that name popping off the sheet? Is Sark talking about him when we talk to him next?
Well, I think it just goes to show the job that Steve Sarkisian and Brandon Harris and this entire coaching staff and recruiting staff did out of the transfer portal, right? Because I remember how we were all feeling after, again, I mean, we knew Anthony Hill was gone. We knew Trey Moore was gone. But after Leon Galafau left, once those guys were gone, it's like, okay, well, at least we've got Lafau, right? Like, it's all good. And Lafau transfers to Colorado, and all of a sudden, oh, God, what is this linebacker room going to look like? And again, the fact that the dude that we all thought was going to be the guy in that linebacker room might not be a quote-unquote starter in that bunch. Just goes to show you the job Texas did. Raheem Biles was a can't-miss guy. Everybody wanted him. But Juice Cryer, like you said, sort of lesser heralded, not super highly ranked in the transfer portal rankings. The fact that Texas kind of found a diamond in the rough, at least it seems with him, is a really, really good find. So that's one of those rooms that I think a lot of fans were like, oh, God, this is going to be a weakness of this team. Now it doesn't feel that way. And we even mentioned the freshmen. And look, again, we're not sure how early on we're going to see these guys, but I guess Texas State will probably see a lot of them in week 1, but I'm talking about the much tougher games. But it seems like Texas might have gone 3 for 3, Evan, with Tyler Atkinson, of course, the 5-star who everybody wanted, but Kosi Okpala and Rocky Cummings. This linebacker room, it might be set for a few years here, which is a really, really good thing.
Yeah, that's one where I'm really happy with the end result of that. And I think, Cummings was a pretty late eval they brought him. I believe he was a 3-star when they signed him, and talk about brand bias or whatever, but by the time he got to college, he was a top 250 recruit. So he looks like a top 250 recruit. I think the size is what really stands out. I mean, Atkinson is one of these players that's been a real benefiter of the current era of college football with NIL, that if you're a really high-level recruit at a high-level high school early on, you can leverage that into private training and really preparing yourself as soon as you're a sophomore to be in the NFL after 3 years. And that's your timeline that you're already on. You have a 6-year plan. So Atkinson looks like a pro already. And Cummings is huge. Opala is huge because he plays that Sam role. So the size really stands out to me. I don't know how much the latter two are going to play this year. I don't even really know how much Atkinson's going to play this year. It might be a similar situation to Terry where you're like, well, you spent all this money on a 5-star. Like, what are you doing here? But it's just because there's guys ahead of him in the room, and you don't want to over rotate your linebackers. That can kind of become a problem if your guys in the second level are just being moved around too much. So I like that group. I'm not going to try to sound like I'm sunshine pumping everything on this defense. Like that's a spot where it could in the season when we get into some of the bigger games, like it reveals that Cryer's maybe not as good in coverage as he was in practice, and that Smith is still struggling a little bit in the run game. And suddenly you're looking, all right, we have Biles, and then is Brad Spence going to be our other Mike linebacker? Is there a real solution there? Is it good enough to play? Where I wish Anthony Hill was still around. So it's something to look out for. Linebacker and safety depth are definitely question marks, but I do think that linebacker, they did a really good job in evals with that freshman class. And, at safety, I know it's not exactly what you asked, but at that position, there's at least a lot of guys. It could be Jonah, it could be Kobe Black, could be JJR, who could fill a role on that defense.
Yeah, well, let's go there next, Evan. And I didn't plan on this turning into just a position-by-position breakdown, but I guess that's kind of what we're doing here. Safety, that's my biggest question for this Texas defense going into the year. Jelani McDonald's not a question. He's one of the best players on this team. He's become a vocal leader. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the SEC. I'm expecting big things from him. And now that Michael Taff is gone, not happy Michael Taff is gone, but happy that Jelani McDonald will get the spotlight a little bit more, and I think he'll get a little more respect that he has earned to this point in his Longhorn career. But the other safety spot, and you've got a couple of Williams in there. You obviously have Kobe Black making the move from cornerback to safety. You've got Jordan Johnson. There's names. There's talent. It's Texas. They always recruit well. There's no doubt about that, but you don't have a lot of proven commodities. And I would say Derek Williams Jr. is a proven commodity, but pre-injury Derek Williams is one thing. Post-injury Derek Williams, I don't think is super proven. So where are you at in that safety battle? How do you think it shakes out? Are you maybe more confident than I am that Texas really does have enough there? Or is that a spot that maybe we'll be talking about Steve Sarkisian regretting not doing more or anything in the transfer portal?
Yeah, no, fair question. I think this is one where we're talking about what Sarkisian's saying to us, and I'm glad that Derek Williams seems very cemented. Like that's where we're at here. Is that D. Wills is safety too. Like let's not beat around the bush here. And so that's what you wanted to hear, because there's the question about how athletically skilled he's going to be, right? Like I mean, it was clearly a step below last year. He probably played less than people expected last season. I think a lot of guys had it tabbed as like he was going to be in rotation with McDonald as safety 2-3 with Taff. And it really was McDonald's spot and then kind of just a few different guys playing at that secondary safety role. So I like that Williams is clearly the starter here. I think he's a good football player, and you want to just have a veteran at that spot, in my opinion, as many snaps as possible. That's what you've seen with a lot of the top teams in the portal. One of the most portal positions for these elite Ohio States, Georgias, Oregons is a safety. You just need a guy who's got experience. Doesn't really matter if it's been in the ACC or not. Someone who knows where to be and where to be in the right spots. And if they hit certain athletic benchmarks, they're good. Ohio State's got like 2 of them. Oregon added Coy Parrish. Georgia's gone there, even though they recruit really well in the secondary a lot. So that's a spot that you're going to see these teams portal in a lot. And I think Sark basically saw that, all right, Derek Williams is kind of floating in the portal already. Is this our best option? That's kind of our take in the transfer portal. So I think Williams is going to be baseline good. I think McDonald's is going to be really good. I'm concerned a little bit about how that looks behind them because, like, I like JJR's idea, but he's going to be a primarily box guy. I mean, he's built like a fire hydrant. He is really bulky, really strong, but he's 5'9", and he's not the fastest player on the field, so he can't be ranging back too far. Yeah. Jonah Williams is a theory. He was one of the 4 I pointed out in that 4 Longhorns article. Like, Jonah Williams, we haven't seen him in pads since the Citrus Bowl, and he actually played more than people gave him credit for to end the season. But let's see him actually playing some football, hitting players, and then Kobe Black's a converted player. So Xavier Filsme is another name who I know people are like, where are we talking about him? Playing a lot of nickel, playing a lot in the slot is kind of big nickel is going to matter this year because they play Missouri and Florida who are going to run the ball a lot. So look out for that. But I'm a little concerned with you about how it looks behind them. But I do like that D. Will is like the guy there, and that's a solid number 2 starter.
Yeah, it seems like he's been the guy with Jelani McDonald with the first team defense pretty much since day 1 of training camp, and that's continued. I was kind of thinking that maybe would be more of a position battle, if you will, for that starting job. But yeah, 1 week in, it does sort of feel like D. Will has that thing locked down, and I'm rooting for him. I mean, we could dive into all of those safeties. There's storylines with all of them. But for Derek Williams, this guy was such a highly touted recruit out of Louisiana, a huge win for Texas to go get him away from LSU and a bunch of other schools who were interested. And I thought he was a bright spot on a not-so-great 2023 Texas secondary as a true freshman. And then what a start he got off to in 2024. Huge game against Michigan in that road win in the Big House. Huge game against Oklahoma before he got hurt against Oklahoma, and that's obviously where everything turned. So, sometimes they say, Evan, like, okay, the year after the injury is not the right year. It's the year after the injury is where you get back to being yourself. That's obviously the hope for Derek Williams and the hope for Texas fans because this is not a projection with this dude. This is a guy who's already shown that he can do this at a very, very high level. If he doesn't have to be as good as Jelani McDonald, but if he could just give you some stability there, I think he could end up being one of the more important pieces on this defense and one of those, oh, thank God we got this guy back out of the transfer portal guys.
Yeah, and I also think, like, imagine you had told a Texas fan 2023, we're going to be concerned about Derek Williams being there year 4, being a starting safety. And thinking, like, what are you talking about? Like, this guy looks like he's the next big thing, like a 3-and-done kind of player at safety. But it's fair to point that out that it was not a huge year for him last year. It was kind of pedestrian. So is he ready to be the number 2 safety? I think so. I lean on the side of it's going to be good. It doesn't need to be this huge playmaker because I think the playmakers are at the pass rushing positions, Rasheem Biles, McDonald, cornerback. Some point, not every guy needs to be the superstar there. And if he can just be good, not having coverage breaks like we saw against Georgia from everyone on that defense, we'll be just fine with him at safety.
And I trust the guy coaching him a little bit more than the guy who was here last year. And I know Dwayne Aquino was the sentimental hire, but I'm not entirely sure what he was doing last year, especially with the backups at safety. So hopefully Blake Gideon. And that's obviously a huge part of why Derek Williams is back because of the relationship he had with Blake Gideon. But, yeah, hoping that position takes an entire step this year. And then the dreaded Jonah Williams question. Like you said, Evan, you had him on your list of 4 Longhorns with the most to gain. Now that the pads have come on, people talk like I feel bad for Jonah Williams for a couple of reasons. The guy doesn't want to get hurt. Like, people talk about him like, oh God, he's trying to get hurt. He doesn't want to play at all. Someone commented on a Locked On episode that I did, like, Jonah Williams just wants to play baseball. He doesn't even want. It's like if that were the case, he would not be training for football. He would not have rehabbed all off season long to get ready for like, the guy wants to play. He doesn't want to be hurt. And people talk about Jonah Williams, Evan, like he's an 8th-year player who has gotten hurt in his first. This is his 2nd football season. And like you said, he played some last year. So the discourse around him, and I'm not sitting here telling you Texas has gotten its return on investment for him. I know he's making a lot. I know the recruiting rankings. I know. But, like, let's not forget, we're talking about a sophomore football player here in a very crowded safety room last year. Like, is this dude's a freak of nature. The recruiting ranking was what it was for a reason. He's 6'2", 6'3", but he can fly across the football field. Is it still a pipe dream, or is it a realistic thing for Jonah Williams to have a role in this Longhorn secondary this year?
He is such a victim of the NIL era, and I say that as he's made a lot of money before he's played a lot of real sports. But this would be a guy who just 5 to 10 years ago, people would be like, man, I can't wait for Jonah Williams to play this year. Like, yeah, I get it. Last year he didn't play a ton. I can't wait for this season and how it's going to look for him. But now it's, he's already taking up too many paychecks at Texas. We would have been better if they didn't pay Jonah Williams. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, listen to what you're saying. I mean, he just, maybe he if he didn't play baseball last year or his first season, he would have played more as a true freshman and shown a little more and flashed as like the number 3 safety truly, and he would have more confidence here. But again, I keep trying to tell people this. The best thing that could have happened for football Jonah Williams is the baseball injury in the spring, because he just got to rest. His shoulder is going to be just fine for football season. He got to rest and fully focus on football. It's not just about the wear and tear. It's about the focus. And he was in the safety rooms in the spring. That's what he was doing. And he went to baseball games on the bench, and he was having fun in the dugout. But at the end of the day, his mind was thinking about the football season. So we're talking about Williams on the same path that the rest of the safety room is on now. Just missed some time the same way Smith did. So who's to say he won't just show up now that he's able to play real football and show out? I think it could happen. I don't think it will happen this season, but he's definitely going to play a good bit, and he's going to have a role on this team. And I think people are going to kind of feel stupid the way they talked about him. This is one of the 10 to 15 best athletes on the team. I mean, he is a really tremendous player. There's a reason he was a 5-star in football, played another side of the field in football, played wide receiver in Galveston, was then also a pretty good recruit in baseball at 2 different positions. We were wondering if he'd pitch at all at Texas. Then he went and played outfield and was a starter by the end of his first season at 17 years old. Just a tremendous athlete there. So people have been too harsh on him. There's too much expectation on him coming into last year, and now it's kind of turned into paycheck stealer talk. And why aren't we hearing more about Jonah Williams? Like, just wait a little bit. Have a little bit of patience. I think it can happen with Jonah. I think he could end up being a really good football player for this team. Just let's wait and see. Let's give him until, like, Oklahoma seems to be a time, BK, every single year where there's a pop. And I think Lance Jackson last year is like a defensive player who really popped out when that game happened. Let's see what happens when Oklahoma's around. I will eat my words if he's still getting 0 snap games.
Yeah, it's crazy. I hope there's a lot of deleted tweets and posts in regards to Jonah
He's a
Williams.
bookmarker. He retweets and bookmarks on Twitter. If you notice, I mean, I don't know for sure if he's bookmarking them, but you go to the Island Boy Twitter and he'll retweet people just hating on him. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, well, I hope he gets the last laugh. I think we all should. It almost feels like people are rooting against him just so they can be right. It's like, give this guy a shot. Again, it's been 1 year. Obviously, during fall camp, he's got to prove that he could make it through fall camp, and that's what you wrote about, right? Like, it's great. He's cleared. He's doing everything that everybody else is doing. But, okay, now that the pads are coming on, can he handle contact? Can he hit? Can he go through a full training camp first and foremost? Obviously, that's what we have now before the season starts. But, man, I think he changes the ceiling of this defense. And maybe it's not this deep. Maybe it is 2027. But, like, if this guy is half of what he was advertised to be, like, again, 6'3", safety with range. He can play center field. He can lower the boom. Like, he does a lot of things really, really well. There aren't a lot of players like him in college football anywhere. And if he just can stay on the field, and it seems like he's done a good job learning the defense, right? He stayed in Austin. He rehabbed this summer. He did everything that he was supposed to do to get right and ready to go for fall camp. I don't know how many guys on this team where it's like, if they break out, Justice Terry's one of them. We talked about it earlier, where it's just the entire ceiling of this team changes. I think Jonah Williams is right at the top of that list, Evan.
It's a great take. I do think he might be the biggest swaying point or point of contention where if it goes good for him and he's the safety 3, where's the weakness on this roster? I do think another one for that is, like, if Cade Phillips takes that jump of, like, yes, he played as a starter last year, but turns into, like, a pick machine and a prototypical man coverage corner. That's the other one where I go, if that is a big difference, and what do you know, it's all these second-year players. It's kind of how it is in college football. That year 2 is where you take that jump. But that will be those 3 players, if they hit in a certain way, and I think maybe Terry's expectations are a lot higher than Williams for what hitting is. But if those guys hit to what their potential could be this year, this is a top 3 to 5 defense in college football. And we're kind of looking silly for talking about the offense so much, because it'll be the defense generating more turnovers than every other team. And they'll be the one that's flashing the stats. Because I think in Steve Sarkisian's perfect world, he has an all SEC defense that does the flashy stuff and pads the stats for their side of the ball. And then the offense just is an EPA machine, efficiency machine, success rate machine. And they're not top 3 in yards in the country, but they're beating every team they face. And so you have to have the defense to do that. And I think if those 3 players are doing that, we're right there.
Yeah, I like throwing Cade Phillips in there too. Very important piece for this Texas secondary as the likely CB2 opposite of Bo Masco. Took over for Jalen Gilbo late last season as a true freshman. And if he's a guy who takes the next step, then yeah, watch out. This Texas secondary can be very dangerous. Our guy Jake says, it's more important for some to be right rather than rooting for your guys. That's very true. That's a sad reality of where we are right now, but that is how a lot of people feel. All right, we'll continue the Longhorn football conversation. Also want to get to Evan's employer On3 and their updated college football preseason top 25 rankings. We won't hold Evan accountable if y'all don't like this list. But before we get to some more college football conversation, I'll give a few more sponsor shout-outs here on a Wednesday show. Some love to our friends at Sue Patrick. Whenever I travel, I'm in Canada right now, It doesn't matter. I'm still repping Sue Patrick, my favorite store in Austin, the best selection of Texas Longhorns gear that you can find in Austin, and you could shop in store, 5222 Burnett Road. They've got free parking. It's a huge lot. You don't have to walk very far to get to the store. All good things. And of course, you could just shop online. If you're lazy, you don't want to deal with the back-to-school crowd that's out there right now, SuePatrick.com. You get free shipping on online orders over $59. The hats, they've got the jerseys, they've got the shirts, the polos, the shorts, the shoes, like accessories, everything your burnt orange heart desires, you can find at Sue Patrick, plus the Jelly Cats. And sometimes they have Nidos, although those things sell out in 2 seconds. That's the biggest craze these days. But they've got everything. Much love to our great friends at Sue Patrick. And shout out to Early Bird CBD as well. Did some traveling, which means I got on a plane, which means I popped an Early Bird CBD gummy, which means my flight was a lot more enjoyable than just about everybody else's flight who I was traveling with. Love the Early Bird CBD, a local Austin company that makes products designed to make you feel good. It's CBD, but also a little microdose of THC as well. So you're going to feel these products when you try them. Now, if you get drug tested at work, Early Bird is not for you. But if you want to take the edge off a little bit, relax, unwind, maybe just chill, that's what Early Bird is all about. They sort of compare their feeling of taking their products to the feeling of 2 glasses of wine. But you don't have to deal with the hangover the next day. That's what Early Bird CBD is all about. You're feeling good. You're relaxing. Bucky takes it for pain alleviation. Whatever your reason, we think you're going to find one. earlybirdcbd.com is the website. The promo code is Bucky, and you are going to get 20% off your first order. And also a shout out to our friends at Kalshi as well. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the conference? Who makes the college football playoff? Who's lifting the trophy at season's end? On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you could trade those predictions in a live market. Will the Longhorns qualify for the playoff this season? Right now, Texas is trading at a 65% probability, meaning a $100 trade would pay out $150 if they clinch a playoff spot. So if you're confident, check out Kalshi and make it happen. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position at any time, trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use the promo code Bucky, and you're going to get $10 when you trade $10. Kalshi. It's Kalshi. Trade on anything. All right, keeping the Texas Longhorn conversation going with Evan Vieth of Inside Texas and InsideTexas.com. I guess this is Texas adjacent because we're talking about On3's updated preseason top 25 rankings going into the 2026 college football season. I feel like On3 has released like 15 of these. And I know you don't have a say, Evan, but how many preseason rankings do you get as a site before you got to choose something and stick with it, you know?
And they love to make it a different type of format or a style. I think this one was like the voted on by the major media, the national media. So they all submitted a ballot, which I think is at least, it's like their version of the AP poll, which is fair to do. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it feels like there's a new On Three, poll, because On Three means Chris Lowe is putting out his poll and then JD Pickell is putting out his. But I will say, I do think, group think and crowdsource stuff is interesting to look at. And we're actually close to the season now where we're going to start seeing the AP poll pretty soon. We're going to start seeing real, we already have the coaches. So SP Plus and FPI, all those things. So it's fun to now really get into the weeds. And I do think we have some clear takeaways you can bring from this.
Yeah, we've kind of passed list season and we have reached ranking season in college football. And obviously fall camps around the country going on, and the actual games will get here before you know it. But the updated On Three college football preseason top 25. This is interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen this before. Ohio State is number one. We've seen that before. They're number one in the coaches poll. They're number one in a lot of these polls. If I had a vote in the AP top 25, they would be my pick as the preseason number one team. They're number one, but for the 11 people polled by On Three in this version of their top 25, none of them picked Ohio State as number one. I've never seen that before. So all of them had Ohio State highly enough to where they had the total amount of points required to, I guess, be number one. But that's interesting. But I guess I'll ask you, Evan. I know you didn't have a vote on this one, but in the Evan Vieth preseason top 25, which is highly coveted, by the way, who would you have as number one? Would you go with the Buckeyes or would you be going with somebody else?
God, it's going to sound like a homer take, but at the end of the day, I think it's your top 25 should be kind of your order of how you think the national title race looks, because there's no games to pick on. So, I know some people advocate for, later in it, you got to put in a G6 team. I don't know which G6 team is going to be good. I'm just going to put 25, mostly SEC and Big Ten teams. And I think the national title is going to be Texas and Oregon. So I think I would really, whenever I release my own kind of rankings, going to take a long, hard think about which team I think is going to be better and probably which team looks better early on. So I would have Texas or Oregon at my 1-2. And I think it's very telling about this Ohio State thing, BK, because it proves that everyone has this idea that they might not be the very best team in the country, but there were probably 11 second place Ohio States, or like 10 with the second place and the third place for someone. Like, clearly they think that they are one of the top three teams. And then the rest of the top 6 or 7 really fluctuates who could be the best. I mean, I will say, like, Indiana feels really low where they're at number 6, and that's still a top 6 team. That's still Indiana. They returned quite a bit of what made them good last year. The only real question marks on that team are quarterback, like maybe tight end a little bit, but I think their defense is going to be great again. It's a lot of the same guys. Wide receiver looks even better coming into it. Is Hoover going to be good enough? He might be the worst quarterback of this top 7. I think there's a clear tier, BK, after Miami, of like everyone has Miami as the 7th best team, and then pick your poison at which SEC team is your number 8. But I think I'd have Texas. I think I'd have Oregon, and then probably that's where I put Ohio State.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should have led with the actual rankings. We won't go 1 through 25, but for those who are curious, the top 10, according to On Three, Ohio State is number 1, Oregon right behind them at number 2. So it's Big Ten back-to-back to start this off. Texas at number 3 ahead of Georgia. Obviously, we know how the SEC media felt about those two teams, considering the Bulldogs were picked to win the Southeastern Conference this year. Notre Dame rounding out the top 5, followed by Indiana, followed by Miami. On 3 went with Oklahoma at number 8. I guess they've never watched John Mateer play. Ole Miss at 9 and Texas A&M at 10. So it's SEC to round out the top 10 according to On 3. I feel like Steve Sarkisian and Dan Lanning are in a similar boat. And, again, list season, everyone has their who are the best coaches in college football. And it felt like those two guys were always next to each other. And some lists would have Dan Lanning 1 spot ahead of Sark. Some would have Sark 1 spot ahead of Dan Lanning. We've had 3 first-time national championship winning coaches in a row. I feel like that's so rare in college football, especially with Nick Saban doing what he was doing for as long as he did at Alabama. So I'm almost prone to pick a first-timer. Maybe you could throw Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Obviously, he would fit that mold too. But it feels like for Sark and Dan Lanning, I don't want to say it's now or never, because those schools both have money. They're always going to recruit well. They've got the resources and talent. But I have to assume, Evan, and maybe you've kept up with more Ducks coverage than I am, but they got to be having the same conversations up there, right? Like veteran quarterback, loaded roster, hit the portal hard. If not this year, when? I feel like Texas and Oregon are kind of in a similar boat, and I think it's pretty funny that you've got them as your 1 and 2 right now.
Yeah, I think what they're happy about is that they're the ones that get the least of that press, when realistically it should be the exact same for Texas, Oregon, and Notre Dame. Probably the last year for all three of their quarterbacks, who are seen as the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. And maybe Notre Dame gets Carr for another year. That's one where I can see that happening. But this is it for Manning and Moore. You have a ton of talent returning, mixed with really good portal class. It's probably your best team that you've had under your current coach. And last year was a little bit of a disappointment. Oregon wasn't a super disappointing season, but they'd won the Big Ten the year before. This past year they didn't get there, and then kind of got destroyed by Indiana. So
yep.
I do think that there's not enough talk about how Lanning in his very final game of the season the last 2 years it's just been completely uncompetitive, not even close. I mean, I think he's been outscored in the first half 78-12 or something like that, something in that range where it's just the game is over. And I know that Sark had a bad year in 2025, but they were 2 kind of crazy plays away from being tied with Ohio State in that game, and Ohio State ended up winning the championship in 2024. So those are my 2 where I'm going. I think on paper it's the best roster. I think on paper they have a top 3 quarterback in the country. 2 coaches that I trust a lot. I think these are 2 of the top 5 coaches in the nation, 4 and 5 right there. It's just that they haven't won the title, and it's so funny, BK. It was a great point you brought up. It's always, what have you done for me before? But what has any of the last few coaches who have won done for you? And the ones who were playing against them in the title game, people hated Mario Cristobal before last year. A lot of people who weren't big CFB guys didn't really know much about Curt Cignetti. Ryan Day was a perennial choker before. Marcus Freeman hadn't won a title, and he played against him that year. It was Jim Harbaugh versus Kalen DeBoer. Harbaugh was also a perennial choker. Kalen DeBoer was just a coach on the come up at that point. So it's since 22 Georgia, and really before that, it was 19 was Orgeron as well. So that was a first-time winner. So you date back 7 years, and the only repeats have been 2 Georgia titles and Nick Saban in 2020 in the COVID year. It's just part of the sport right now, is that, you get the right combination for the right coach, they can go win it. And I do think that of those 4 coaches that have won a title, I don't think Dabo's going to have a championship squad, but this is probably the year you can get ahead of Georgia, where I'm not sure you trust their passing game as much. And Ohio State just went off a cycle of 3 top 11 picks and a bunch of other talent leaving. And Indiana, how likely is it you replicate 16-0 with just a new quarterback? And it's just so unlikely. So I'm fine with Texas not being the number 1 team here, but I do think Texas and Oregon should be top 2 in title odds. I think they should be the top 2 teams in the nation this season. And I don't feel uncomfortable saying that it's going to be another first-time coach with those 2 in the title game.
Yeah, it's rare to be like, we don't want to be number 1. I feel like that doesn't make sense as a sports fan, but I think most college football fans know the quote-unquote curse that comes along with being the preseason number 1 team in America. So I was pretty happy to see Ohio State ranked number 1 in the coaches poll, and Texas way down at number 4. That tells me we don't have to worry about the AP thing coming out when that poll comes out here in the not too distant future. But yeah, big year for all of those guys. And that's a great point. I mean, Harbaugh had to cheat his way to a title, but you're right. A lot of failures before getting that one. I mean, Buckeye fans still want Ryan Day fired, even though he won one. But obviously before he won one, they all wanted him out of there. Curt Cignetti, a relative unknown coming out of nowhere. So the blueprint has been laid for these first-year coaches, or first-time coaches, I should say, to win a national championship. Obviously, we're hoping Texas can do that this season. Talking about those 7 teams, you said it was a pretty obvious 1 through 7. It's just kind of how do you order those top 7? Is there anybody outside that list, Evan, that you think has a legitimate shot to win a national title, or do you really feel like the winner of this entire thing is going to be somebody from that list of teams that we just touched on?
I do think it's going to be one of these 7 teams, if I had to put my money on it. The 2 that I would point out are kind of the Kiffin adjacent guys. It's Ole Miss, LSU, where I don't believe it in year 1 with Kiffin, and I don't believe it with Pete Golding as much without, I saw it pointed out on our board the other day. Paul Waldington had a really good article about Ole Miss that, this is now Rodney Terry without Chris Beard's team. How does that look? So, but I will say, Ole Miss made the Final Four last year, and what made them good defense, elite quarterback play, elite running back play, it's all still there, and the wide receiver core has been really rebuilt. Jonte Cook's going to start for them. But at the end of the day, Chambliss, Lacey, and a good defense is hard to bet against in a 1-game sequence in the playoff. That's why I think they're there. And then, I mean, LSU is a top 7 to 8 talent team. I think they're ahead of kind of the rest of the teams above them between Miami and they. But it's still a year one coach with a kind of an unproven quarterback still in Sam Levitt. Like I don't really know what Sam Levitt's going to be. Probably the biggest range of outcomes of any elite kind of level quarterback in the country. I don't know exactly how good the skill positions are going to be. Really hard to doubt Lane Kiffin's skill positions, but running back and wide receiver are definitely theoretical more than they are proven. O-line, a similar thing. So I get why they're low. I could definitely see it. But outside of that, like, it does feel like this year with how many good quarterbacks there are in college football, way better than last year, in my opinion, that it's going to be a team with the quarterback play to do it. Which is why I'll fade Tech, why I fade OU and A&M for now, unless they really show me. I do think Oklahoma's defense is going to separate them into this kind of top 9 to 10 range, but I just don't know if they're going to win a title off that. USC might be a sleeper. Like, what if it does come together for Lincoln Riley? Big what if, but like the defense could be good, and they do have one of the quarterbacks that you want, and Lincoln Riley offenses are always high powered, but I would keep it at that 9 of could win the title.
Yeah, and I think that's more than I would add. Like, I agree with your first take of one of those 7 teams is going to end up winning it all. But look, no one would have thrown Indiana into that conversation last year. That's the beauty of college football and just the beauty of sport in general is you might think everything that's going to happen, and then all of a sudden somebody comes out of nowhere. So we will see. I didn't ask you this. At least I don't think I've asked you this before. Did you pick Texas to win the SEC on your SEC preseason ballot? Did you get an SEC preseason ballot?
Georgia. Georgia was I was one of the Georgia guys. I think
interesting.
It just makes it's so hard to pick against Smart, and I think they're built for their schedule is really easy. So I think betting on them getting there is very simple. And then once they're there, I'm just not going to bet against a Kirby Smart team in the SEC championship. I just have my concerns about their legs once they face a really elite Big Ten team.
Got it. Yeah, I feel the same way. And I was just curious because you said you had Texas and Oregon as kind of your 1-2 in your preseason poll. And look, Georgia's had no problem winning the SEC. They have had a problem with their first playoff game the last 2 years. The bye has absolutely killed them, and they've lost their first round game in each of them. So fascinated to see what happens there. But Texas and Georgia, there's a lot of folks thinking we get that matchup in Atlanta for the second time in the last 3 seasons. All right. I'm trying to think. Any sleeper teams that you've got, Evan? I know you kind of mentioned too with Ole Miss and LSU. This is not to win a national championship. This is just, is there somebody out there, whether they're in this On3 top 25 or not, that you think maybe isn't getting talked about enough nationally that you feel like has the makings of a team who can crash the CFP party this season?
Yeah, I think 2 teams that maybe aren't getting the CFP qualification respect, and actually On3 did rank one of them higher than I've seen a lot, is I do think you look at Penn State's schedule and I go, how do they not go 10-2 if they're just a baseline good team? They have the easiest schedule of the Power 2 teams in the nation. I mean, it's not even close. They play no one out of conference, and then they dodge all 3 of the top kind of elite teams. They get USC at home as their hardest game. So, they go and win a whiteout against USC, and they're probably making the college football playoff, which, I'd love to see the conversation between 9-3 Texas / Oklahoma and 10-2 Penn State. BYU is returning so much production, and that's kind of become a stat that you have to be careful with at this point in time, because it means that sometimes that you're keeping players that aren't that good and you're not adding the portal enough. But returning quarterback, a lot of people love Kalani Sitake and love to rank him top 10 as a coach, and then don't give BYU much respect in the polls, where I'm like, yeah, guys, Sitake's a really good coach with a lot of returning production and a good quarterback, an all Big 12, all American level running back. The trenches are going to be good. I think that they would be my Big 12 favorite. Like, I get Tech did a lot, but both teams' passing games are going to be bad. I think that BYU can win them head-to-head matchup with Bear Bockermeyer kind of just out-gutting Will Hammond there. And then a real deep sleeper of a team who I'm like, everything that makes football teams good is they have this. It's just kind of, it is everything in general with the talent going to be there. Cal, I mean, you're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and I'm not even going to try to say JKS's full name, but the lefty former 5-star, was a former Oregon commit, was unreal last year. And they added 2 NFL wide receivers to their team. Adam Muhammad at running back was playing really well for Washington last year. And their defense is going to be a question, but talking about the ACC being wide open, Miami has not won the ACC recently. So, like, if you look at a team that can maybe sneakily be 10-2, 9-3, get into that game and then win auto qual, it happened recently with Clemson, kind of an underappreciated team, and then Duke didn't make the playoff because they were kind of terrible. But what if Cal does that? Like, what if that's a team where their passing game is just really, really good and they win a lot of 45 to 39 games?
Shout out to you. Cal is the most off the beaten path sleeper pick I've seen. Yeah. Like I was going to say, I like the Penn State pick because their schedule is unbelievably easy. Every Big 12 schedule is unbelievably easy, and BYU doesn't have to play Texas Tech in the regular season. So, I think there's a very good chance we'll get that game in Arlington again in December. Those two make sense, but Cal is like, I'm scrolling through my Phil Steele magazine here, Evan, and
like 70th.
He's got, I don't even know if he has them ranked. He's got Cal 12th in the ACC.
There you go.
And I think
I'm pulling up FPI right now to see where they had him. I'm
scrolling a lot further than I anticipated.
Fourth to last on FPI. So that's your deep cut.
If Cal goes 8-4 this year, I think you deserve credit for that. Let alone
I'll take 8-4. That's fine. Let
alone getting close to the college.
I mean, they might have the best quarterback in the conference, maybe outside of Mensa. And so you quarterback play, wide receiver play, win some shootouts. I don't think they play anything too hard out of conference. I'm just saying.
I like that. Yeah, they've got UCLA in week 1, which is somehow an out of conference game now.
That is hilarious. That's gonna be a good game. Like Nico versus JKS week 1. I'll be tuned in if that's the late night.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time just figuring out like what games are conference games with Cal and what games are not conference. So they have Syracuse in week 2. Syracuse is now a conference game.
Syracuse Cal, week 2 is a conference game for Cal.
Okay.
I grew up a Syracuse guy because my dad went there, but they don't have much to worry about.
Got it. All right. You're in the right line of work then if your dad went to Syracuse.
I almost went there. I almost early action to Syracuse, so I ended up at Texas.
There you go. Good choice by you. Avoid the Carrier Dome at all costs. Wagner, number 3. Okay, UNLV is their other non-conference game. I mean, none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense anymore. They've been in the ACC for like 3 years, and it still
doesn't feel – they and Stanford are the biggest – a small little rant here. I know that Texas was like – one of the primary reasons that we're at where we're at. But at the end of the day, the SEC is border locked. Like Texas to Florida gets there. The Big Ten is clearly in the ACC. Even the Big 12, like UCF doesn't fit into that, but the Big 12 is generally that Midwest area. The Big Ten and ACC went way too far with adding these California teams. Like that's the worst part of expansion.
Yep, everybody blames Texas for it, but you're right. Like the Texas and Oklahoma move made some sense. A lot of what has happened since then does not. But hey, Texas State is now a Pac-12 team. All right, imagine telling somebody that 5 years ago that Texas State was going to be in the Pac-12 conference. That would have been the most absurd thing. You could have won a lot of money on that deal if you'd placed that bet. That's for sure. Evan Vieth of Inside Texas and InsideTexas.com joining us here on Bucky and BK. A couple of y'all have asked about the Buck. He is okay. Load management. He's actually out the rest of the week. Vacationing to nowhere. Are you a staycation guy, Evan? I've never really understood the staycation. I know flying sucks and gas prices are what they are. I like being home. Don't get me wrong, but I'm going to take days off of work. I'm going somewhere, right?
I can get behind, and my girlfriend and I have like been planning to do this for 2 years now, but I can get behind like going to like maybe rent an Airbnb out on the lake and going somewhere in Austin that you just don't have much access to and do maybe like an outdoorsy thing, but not to stay in my house for a vacation.
The Buck is one of a kind. Yeah, I'm with you. You know, you want to go out to Lost Pines Resort and hang out or a place like that you don't have at home. That makes sense. But, now I think he's staying in Dripping. He called me like 5 minutes before the show, and I'm like, are you doing the show today? What's going on? The Buck marches to the beat of his own drum. That's for sure. But he is okay for those of you who have checked in. All right, Evan, back to the Texas football conversation. The Cam Coleman catch, I don't know if you're tired of talking about it. Maybe it's old news at this point, but somehow that video that Texas posted on social media over the weekend just continues to go more and more viral. I think we're at like upwards of 15 million views at this point of that catch. It's not really to ask about that catch. It's more to ask about Cam Coleman and just what he brings to this Texas offense. And it feels crazy to ask this considering this was the number one non-quarterback in the transfer portal, and I think some services had him as the number one player in the portal. But is there a chance that he's better than advertised? Is there a chance that Texas is maybe getting more than what they thought they were getting, despite investing millions, plural, of dollars in Cam Coleman?
I really don't think you can call him underrated, because everyone knows that the stats lie with what he had. And he's not a 1,300 in 2 years kind of guy that he was at Auburn, and number one and top 10 pick expectation. I think it's maybe more, I mean, you can't say confirmed for a guy before he's played a snap, but I think it's a lot less theoretical than what some people think. Like, he's going to come onto that field and look like the best receiver in college football when Jeremiah Smith's not playing, and maybe you give Malachi Toney that nod over him. But like, I think we're maybe a little just more bullishly confident without any kind of reservations than we might have expected to be. But I do think he's getting the hype plenty. A lot of people, and this has been a thing with Texas for a while, is draft people like the Texas roster more than maybe some CFB people like the Texas roster. But anyone who knows the draft and knows football, it will tell you that Cam Coleman's going to be a special player. And I think that this kind of catch maybe reminded a lot of the average fans, like, oh man, Texas did get Cam Coleman, didn't they? And he's going to be really good for them, isn't he? So once he starts running real routes and a real route tree and getting him some yak opportunities, that first like 2 missed tackle run that he gets from a slant or something is going to have people going crazy, maybe even more than the contested catches things. And I was watching a CFB hype video last night with my roommates, and we just got reminded some of the crazy things he did. He had his own little like 30-second segment of just the Vanderbilt game where he goes and catches it on one cornerback like 4 times.
Yep.
It's like, it's not theoretical with him. It's just that Auburn couldn't get him the ball the right way. So it's going to show up. He's going to be an amazing player.
I think I've watched that YouTube video at least 400 times this offseason to get ready for the season. And, we had the conversation earlier about guys who raised the ceiling of this football team. Obviously, Cam Coleman is that dude on the offensive side of the football. And man, he hasn't been a diva, right? You always worry with guys who are making that much money out of the portal. And I think you just worry about star wide receivers in general, right? Some of the extra stuff that typically comes with a player like that. It feels like he wants to get better. I mean, he could have taken more money to go to Texas Tech or maybe a couple of other places as well. But this guy seems focused on, yeah, of course, there's some playing for the name on the back of the jersey. He wants to get developed. He wants to be a high draft pick, and he wants to be ready for the NFL from the moment he gets his name called by Roger Goodell. But it also does feel like he's a team guy. Like, he wants to win at Texas. He could have gone somewhere else, and if he didn't care about that, he does seem like a guy who's tired of losing from what he had to deal with at Auburn with god-awful quarterback play and a god-awful head coach who liked golf more than he liked football. And now it's, I don't know. It's just everything that I read about this guy from you and from inside to from everywhere, it's just he's doing more than I think anybody anticipated. And maybe Sark is like, oh, no, that's why we got him. We knew. I don't even think they knew exactly all they were getting from a positive standpoint, not just with the player Cam Coleman, but with the person Cam Coleman too.
Yeah. Like, I completely agree. That's been easily the most positive part of the Cam Coleman experience, is like, there's just never any issues. There's never problems. There's never eye over team kind of things. It really, the Wingo thing really sold me when they were recruiting him. Like, I mean, this is going back to before he was committed to Texas, but when Wingo was the one who was leading the charge of the recruitment and taking him out to dinner and saying, I want you to play with me, that's the best thing you could possibly hear about your wide receiver room, especially with the way Texas has been burnt by Jonte Cook. And, Isaiah Bond is the best rated wide receiver they've ever gotten from the transfer portal, and that really did not end well. And I'm not calling Bond a true diva, but clearly Coleman's got just a different makeup about him. So, yeah, man, he's going to post a picture in front of the Lambo that he's got a sponsorship for, but doesn't mean that he's got a head case kind of attitude to him. And so you're talking about a team with Arch Manning, Ryan Wingo, Cam Coleman as your kind of primary playmakers, but there's not an ego problem. That's an awesome, awesome feeling to have for your coach Sarkisian.
Yeah, wouldn't you? If someone gave you a Lambo, wouldn't you post it on social media too?
I'm going to post that video.
I'll be posting every single day, so I'm not going to fault a guy for wanting to show that off. He's earned it. He's absolutely earned it, and it's a great time to be a college athlete right now. But the wide receiver room in general, Evan, I mean, obviously it starts with Cam Coleman. He's the guy who's generated most of the national and even local headlines and buzz. Everywhere I go, I'm sure you have this too with your buddies. They want to know about Cam Coleman, but there's so much more to that. Like, that wide receiver room is, I think, the best room on this team. And I think, like, maybe defensive tackle, you could make a case, but I feel like wide receivers kind of far ahead of everything else.
Most improved too. Just the difference between last year to this.
Yeah, and I just I feel like Ryan Wingo, he proved that he could be a number one wide receiver in the SEC last year. He was second team all conference. I think Emmett Mosley, I know we've talked about this. I think you've written about this within the last couple of weeks. He's a guy who could be a number one wide receiver. And I'm not talking about like on a Jackson State or on a North Texas, whatever, random FCS or G5 school.
Oklahoma, he'd be the number one outside guy.
He might be. So having that guy as your number 3 and then Khalil Lockett, and it's just an embarrassment of riches that Texas has at wide receiver. And I guess I've got to turn this into a question somehow. I'm just ranting because I'm excited about what they have. Outside of those 3 guys, we know Sark has kept a pretty tight wide receiver rotation at Texas, although he's loosened things a little bit the last 2 years. But it's not only are the other guys good enough? It's, do we ever want to take these top 3 guys off the field? Who of the other guys do you think is good enough to push for playing time? And maybe who are you most excited to hear about now that the pads are coming on in training camp?
I think there's 4 players good enough to push for playing time. 2 of them I kind of blocked by Coleman, in my opinion, where Khalil Lockett, I think, is a really special talent. And one of the players that I most expect for next year when we're talking about this team, that like the biggest difference in production quality between 2026 and 2027 when he's a junior and kind of has a chance without Coleman there. He and Sterling Burkhalter, who I think Burkhalter in a pinch could give Texas quality X receiver snaps, and worst case, do some clear out routes. Best case, a really good blocker, catch a ball downfield. Really, for me, I'm looking at Jermaine Bishop, of course. And then Dalen McCutcheon. I think McCutcheon's going to play a decent amount of secondary slot snaps. Remember, he caught passes against Ohio State, right?
Yep.
Like in the first 3 drives, I think it was, when Texas went and got down the field and got stopped at the 1-yard line when they should have scored on that play. But, Dalen McCutcheon had a catch on like an RPO that got them into the red zone and got them inside the top 10. So we're talking about someone who they clearly trust, and I think is the wide receiver 4 until Jermaine Bishop surpasses him. But I think Jermaine Bishop's eventually, he was the 4th guy outlined in that top, like when the pads are out case where, it's not that he wasn't playing in the spring, but he's easily the lightest player on the team, 166 pounds. Can he deal with the level of physicality of his team's SEC defense? Can he be able to go across the middle of the field, catch the ball, take a hit from a safety? If we're talking about a guy who's able to stay durable, they're going to find so many ways to get him the ball in fun, creative ways. It feels like every year, and maybe outside of last year, there's a way that they get a freshman the ball in his hands creatively. And I think of Ryan Wingo week 2 against Michigan. Find him a play like that, an end around, some kind of toss in front of a jet sweep, anything like that. And I think Jermaine Bishop could have one of those big plays against Ohio State early on. And I do think that by the end of the year, this is the wide receiver 4. This is someone who clearly is taking snaps that on clear passing downs or when someone's tired, he's coming in as the first guy off the bench and making a real impact.
Is a Xavier Worthy comparison fair for Jermaine Bishop? Obviously super light. Worthy hit the ground running as a freshman, but part of that was out of necessity because Texas's wide receiver room in Sark's first year was not good at all and nowhere close to what it is right now. But is that, maybe not those types of numbers this year, but that type of impact, do you think that could potentially happen with Jermaine Bishop by season's end?
Yeah, if Jermaine Bishop was on the 2021 team, he would have been starting. I think it's pretty clear to say. And it's hard not to compare him because it's a Texas player who's known for his speed, who's smaller. But like Jermaine Bishop is a 1-of-1 Texas high school football player. You could argue when my friend Carter Yates is talking about the best Texas high school wide receivers in 15 years, he might be number 1 on that list for what he was doing. So just so much explosiveness there. It's hard to compare to Worthy because Worthy had more physicality than people gave him to. He could bounce off tackles, and he wasn't running anyone over, except for Oklahoma State in the title game. He ran a dude over in that game. But, Worthy could bounce off players really well. I'm not sure that's going to be in Bishop's game so much, but you're talking ball in the hands, elusiveness, flatline speed, maybe not 4.22, but 4.3 speed. I think that's a clear comparison for Bishop.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does. And then Dalen McCutcheon, I'm glad you brought him up too, because I feel like Texas fans have soured on him a little bit. He did have some drop issues. You think of the Michigan game where Khalil Lockett really stepped up, and we saw a lot of guys who didn't get a ton of playing time get some opportunities because of the opt-outs and the transfers and this, that, and the other. And it felt like Dalen McCutcheon didn't make the most of his opportunity. But you brought up a great point. Yeah, like first game as a freshman on the road against the defending champion Ohio State Buckeyes, the fact that guy got snaps and like there were third downs where Texas was going to him. And it wasn't like, there's nobody open. Arch is just going to throw. It was like, no, the ball was the play was designed to go to Dalen McCutcheon. So I don't think all of a sudden, just because there were some bumpy freshman moments for Day, that Sark and Chris Jackson have soured on this guy. Like I think there might be some, why is this guy on the field thoughts when he gets to play early in the season. I hope you're right, Evan, and this is a guy who does play a big role and maybe prove some people wrong too.
I think it's just, the Michigan game, he had a lot of drops. That soured a lot of people's opinions. And he also, he was in a 4-man wide receiver class where he was the lowest ranked. So people just didn't really care that much about him. And so they didn't, I guess they wanted to see French and Lockett ahead of him and Michael Terry, but you got to earn that. And he's clearly earned it. And then he had the best play of the spring game. And I know not everyone saw it. It wasn't like a televised thing, but we're talking about, diving to the pylon, toe tapping both hands or both feet, draped all over him in coverage. But I think Bo Masco, this guy has hands. He can block really well. He's everything that you like about a Sarkisian, slot receiver is what Dalen McCutcheon is. And in a similar line, he would have been DeAndre Moore if he was on that team where DeAndre Moore 2024 was a sophomore. That's where he would have had that same kind of development of year two, underrated recruit starting at slot. It's just, you got Emmett Mosley there instead of, who else would have been competing with more. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. I guess Jonte Cook, but he was in the slot receiver. So it's the same idea. I think McCutcheon's kind of going underrated as a result.
Yeah, that catch he made during that spring game or fan day or whatever we're supposed to call it. Yeah, that was sensational for sure. He's a great athlete and a great talent. And again, it's just an embarrassment of riches. It's a first world problem that Texas has in its wide receiver room. And obviously you hope everybody stays healthy, but somebody goes down. That's not a position where you're like, oh God, what are we going to do? There are some spots where I feel like, Evan, it's hard to build depth now. Obviously it's easier at a place like Texas than it is at a place like North Texas. Boy, the Mean Green are catching some strays today. I'm not sure why. Sorry about that, UNT. But nowadays with just the portal and NIL and guys wanting to play, it's like guys aren't going to stay. You can't just have guys waiting in the wings for 2 or 3 years and it's they're patient waiting for their opportunity to come. The fact that Texas has built up wide receiver depth the way that they have, obviously the portal has helped. That's really cool, and you don't see that very often. And I don't know if there's a deeper wide receiver room top to bottom in college football in 2026.
Yeah, no, and I think top to bottom is where you're really right. The only one I'd say competes, and we keep going back to it, I do think Oregon, when you look at their 1 through 4 compared to Texas 1 through 4 when Bishop's there, and even I'm not exactly sure who you'd say their 5th is, but they also get 5-star receivers like it's nothing. That's another team where I'm like, I do think top to bottom we're competing. But when we're also talking about the 1 and 2, how many is better than Coleman and Wingo? It's at least Indiana is the only team where I really go, the number 1 and the number 2 are better. Or Ohio State, if you count Jeremiah Smith, is just unequivocally the best. But
right,
yeah, you're right. It's this and D-line are what really, and of course Arch Manning, it's what really gets me excited about the ceiling of this Texas team. And looking back, there were some Texas colored glasses last year where we were saying certain rooms are really good, but we can tell that it's different coming in than it was with Parker Livingston starting, and same with the D-line. I don't think there was a single room on last year's team where I came in more excited about the players in it than I do about the wide receiver and D-line in 2026.
Yeah, they're going to be special for sure. Evan Vieth of Inside Texas joining us here. Bucky out for the day, out for the remainder of the week. We've got some great guests filling in for the Buck over these next 3 days. We'll dive back into the Texas conversation. Want to talk more about the running backs and want to get into a little Kyle Flood chatter as well. But before brace yourself. Maybe get the Tums ready for this next one, Evan. But before we go anywhere else, a couple more sponsor shout outs. Unfortunately, no Altstadt Beer up in the Pacific Northwest in Vancouver, British Columbia. That's disappointing. But look, back home in Texas, I've got my mini fridge stocked with the Altstadt Beer. We're already ready to go for the season. I mean, the preseason's here. We've had an NFL game. We've got more NFL games coming tomorrow. Football is upon us. You need a great beer to accompany your football watching all season long. Your tailgates, your watch parties, maybe if you just like to hang out at home on Saturdays and Sundays and watch by yourself, however you fan your football is better with a great beer. Altstadt is my choice. Brewed locally in Fredericksburg, easy to find all across the Lone Star State. They've got tons of different brews as well, and this is award-winning stuff out of an award-winning brewery. If you haven't tried it yet, you are missing out. If you have tried it, you know exactly what I am talking about. It's the official beer of BK. It should be the official beer for you as well. It's Altstadt Beer. No impurities, no regrets. And some love to our guy, Mike McCall, and his great team at McCall Custom Homes. Custom home builders, custom home remodelers in Central Texas. And, well, they've got a lot of experience. They know what they're doing. They've been around the block. More than 4 decades of experience. It's a father-son team that started in Austin and has stayed in Austin. So if you're looking to totally transform your home or, again, build from the ground up, reach out to our guy, Mike McCall, and his team at McCall Custom Homes. McCall Custom Homes, ATX.com is the website. 512-633-9580, the phone number to call. A+ rated by the BBB. Tons of 5-star reviews online as well. When you reach out, make sure you tell them you heard about them right here on Bucky and BK. All right, I don't know if that overlay banner was showing. Is it on the screen? Is it not on the screen? I don't know what's going on with the Wi-Fi in Fairmont or at the Fairmont Hotel. I'm in a room I'm probably not supposed to be in right now. And it's also
a conference room at a hotel.
See, like I asked about a conference room and none of those were open. So I got here yesterday and I'm like, hey, because it's, it's Pacific time here. So it's 7:36 in the morning right now. And I'm like, I'm probably going to set up at like 5. Is there a conference room open? There's got to be something open, right? And they're like, yeah, but we can't give you access to that. So I'm like, all right, how do I pivot? And we pivoted here and starting to pick up a little bit because it's 7:30. I guess people are getting out of bed and moving and grooving. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just glad you can hear me and see me. I wasn't sure about the Wi-Fi or any of this.
Things are working for sure.
Things are working. That is great to hear for sure. All right, Evan Vieth joining us here on Bucky and BK. The running back room. I guess we haven't talked about them. And you wrote another article. I'm clearly a subscriber to Inside Texas, if you couldn't tell. Talking about like 3 big themes I think that you had noticed for Texas through the first few days of fall camp, or maybe takeaways was the word that you used. And one of the things was like just an embarrassment of pass catchers that Texas has. Obviously, we just talked about the wide receivers, but something that made the Texas offense as good as it was in 2024 was the fact that Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner both had 40-plus catches out of the backfield. Like those guys were difference makers as receiving threats. I mean, Jaden Blue was a better route runner than a lot of the receivers Texas had on the team that year. That guy was awesome at that. And you just didn't have that last year. Trey Wisner, his hands fell a little bit. Obviously, the hamstring injury, he wasn't the same player. Everybody knows this. You didn't have Jaden Blue on the roster at all. So, Screen Sarkeesian, as I like to call him, just having that extra element of your running backs being difference makers in the passing game, that was not there. I know everyone's more focused on getting the running game back on track with these running backs, but Evan, I'm pretty intrigued to see what Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers and maybe at some point Derek Cooper can bring to the passing game as well. Texas didn't have we'll dump it off 3 yards and then it could turn into a 30-yard play last year. I think they maybe have 2, if not 3 of those guys this year.
Yeah, I will say that like part of the problem last year wasn't exactly the running backs not catching the ball. It was more so not a lot of opportunities to dump it off because it was dump offs happen because of longer extended plays, and those plays weren't happening even with Arch Manning doing his best. So it's not exactly an indictment on Wisner, but I was talking with someone recently about the 2024 team, and it felt like the best 2 plays in the red zone for Texas were, or 3 plays if you add late year Arch Manning, but really Matthew Golden to the pylon and Jaden Blue out of the backfield, throwing the ball. I mean, those were the 2 you relied on, and that just wasn't there last year. And it wasn't, the speed wasn't there. And yeah, my point was like, playmakers in general have taken such a leap here because Wingo Mosley take another step forward, and then you place Livingston with Cam Coleman, a big upgrade, and then the running back room has just been crazily upgraded here. Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown are going to play a lot in the pass catching game. I'm not sure how much Cooper will be early on. Maybe it's a late year development, but Smothers, the concern with him is more that can he pass block, because they kind of threw him out to the flat at NC State last year. It's like, all right, you go over there, and if we throw you the ball, you're going to make a good play with it. And he did. There were a lot of times where I believe CJ Bailey's their quarterback, where they just were kind of able to move around and get him the ball eventually late in the play and then make a guy miss. And so I think he's one where the dump off game shows up a lot. And then Brown is one I'm really looking for screens with him, getting him out and into space with blockers ahead of him. That's where his straight line, just running past people's speed, is going to really show up. And the hard for him to be tackled is going to show up there as well. And I'm not sure about the red zone as much with the running back pass catching game. That's where I think Jaden Blue was a little different. And Jaden Blue, for some of his faults, especially fumbling and things like that, he was a really talented pass catcher at the goal line, better than a lot of running backs you see. Bijan Robinson was a really talented pass catcher. Expectations of there for Brown and Smothers, probably too much, but in between the 40s when they're trying to find explosives and teams are looking over the top, that's where you can really find value from a running back passing game. So I do think we're going to be talking about two guys where they have 30 catches on the year from the running back, or maybe one of them is at 40, one's at 20, and it's going to be a lot more involved than it was in 2025.
Yeah, both of those guys did eclipse 30 catches last season. Obviously, at different schools, so there's more competition for those receptions this time around. But, yeah, fascinated to see what they bring to this offense. And I don't know if it matters at all, Evan, but is there one of those running backs who's stepping up, like emerging from the other one? It feels like, and Starks kind of told us, it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation. You don't invest as much as Texas did into both of those guys to have one of them ride the pine for an entire season. But early on, from what y'all have seen or heard, is there one who's clearly better than the other, or is it really like, no, there's almost like obviously different skill sets, but there's almost no difference in terms of talent, regardless of which one you have on the field?
Yeah, we had an article drop recently, like who's the top guy at each position room, and that's you get a true idea of who the number one is when you have to pick between Smothers and Brown, and it was Smothers, and that's something that where I pointed out on Twitter a lot that like Brown has definitely been the more hyped player. I think people talk about Raleigh Brown a lot more, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I've always been one who said, like, I think Smothers is the better of the two backs, and he's going to be the one that has more of a capability to truly, it's not going to be a true bell cow, but take more carries and get more yardage as the game goes on. I think he's a smoother runner. I think he's got a better feel for the inside zone type of run plays where you just need to be able to find the right hole and get the right cut at a certain time. He's really shifty side to side, whereas Brown's got a lot more straight line power and straight line speed. I do think that Smothers is going to be the one that emerges of the two as having the more carries per game. And I also think it's better for Brown to be a 12 carry guy compared to a 20 carry guy. Mm-hmm. He's had some times where you look when he gets into that 15 plus range, and that didn't happen often. And it seems like he lost steam a little bit, that the stamina got to him. So I think Brown's in his best spot where you're limiting it to 15 or fewer touches per game. And those touches are hyper efficient. And what's going to happen, BK, is that Smothers is going to have more carries for more yards, but at a lower efficiency. People are going to go, well, yards per attempt, Brown's higher. Why is he not getting more carries? And it's going to be, if it's working, then it's going to be, why would we change that? If that's what ends up being what works for Texas, then that's what you want from Smothers. I do think he's going to end up being the higher yardage back this year, the one who gets, if one of them gets to 1,000 yards, I think it's going to be Smothers. And I do think he's the better of the two.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the individual numbers look like from these running backs this year. And like you said, I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as the team rushing statistics are significantly improved, as long as they're much more efficient running the football, as long as they can actually pick up yards when they need to on the ground, it's not going to matter. But like, I guess nobody talks about it anymore because the streak is over. The 1,000-yard running back streak that Steve Sarkisian had. And last year, it took until the A&M game before anyone got to 500 yards. Needed the rival reaper, Trey Wisner, to do what he did in that game. So, like, no one's really brought that up. But I don't know if we're going to see a running back get to 1,000 yards. I mean, there's like vultures. I know that's got a negative connotation, but like maybe you're right. Maybe Hollywood Smothers does get the most carries on this team, but Raleigh Brown's going to take away carries from him. Obviously, Arch Manning's legs are going to be a big part of the offense this year. Eventually, Derek Cooper will emerge. So there might be people who are like, oh, Texas didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher. What's the day? They might not need that to have one of the more efficient running games in college football this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a need, and that's always something that kind of gets overblown when a coach has a yardage streak, because it's just very unimportant for really what matters for your team. And of course, we're going to talk about it as long as he's got it. But at the end of the day, like it's pretty easy to get that when you have Jonathan Brooks and Trey Wisner on a good year, but also Bijan Robinson. Like those guys are going to get you 1,000 yards. I care much more about with this offense this year, the efficiency, the advanced stats, penalties, which we talked about at the start of the show. Care about that much more than what the yardage numbers are for the individual players. If the yards per attempt looks good, the yards after contact looks good for the running backs, if the passing game is good because of them, who cares if they get to 1,000 yards, or if one of them is at 850 and one's at 700? That's way better than it was the year before. And at the end of the day, it's just about how it all blends into one offensive system. And I do think that the more Texas is winning games, the more running the ball is going to happen. So the stats are going to get inflated. But keep in mind how hard the schedule is. They're going to have to come from behind a few times this year. And so that's when the offense has to open up the passing game. I do think BK, there's going to be far fewer games where you remember last year where it just felt like there were some games where 8 carries was the max for a running back. Like Trey Wisner against Georgia, I think had 8. Florida, they had to go away from it really early on because they just couldn't run the ball. And none of the games felt like Oklahoma where they were running it a lot because Mississippi State, they had to come from behind and pass the ball so much. So that's where I doubt we're going to have that problem as much this season. I think Texas is going to be able to run the ball consistently, quarter to quarter, game to game, a lot better.
That's the bread and butter of the Steve Sarkisian offense. And I know everyone wants to talk about Arch Manning and Cam Coleman and these great receivers, and not to disparage them. You should want to talk about them. But, yeah, Steve Sarkisian's identity as an offensive play caller has always been running the football first. And not being able to do that in 25 messed everything else up. And that's something that has to change. So we've made it this far. I haven't even asked you about Arch Manning yet. Interesting. It sounds like Arch Manning's a little more confident. Sounds like he's talking a little more smack. I mean, Steve Sarkisian told us that on Monday, that he's been chirping a little bit. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like,
I agree.
You don't have to be rah-rah to be a good leader, but I think it's better if you're like louder, you're more vocal, especially if you're playing that position. And Arch, I feel like a lot of Arch last year was proving that he belongs, right? Like, yeah, I know what my last name is, but I've got to earn my spot on this team, and I haven't really done anything yet, and I've got to go replace Quinn Ewers and be really good. Obviously, he had some rough moments in the first half of last season, but with the way he played down the stretch, was one of the best quarterbacks in college football over the last 5, 6, 7 games, whatever number you want to use. I think now everybody in that locker room trusts him. I think he trusts himself. He's confident in himself, first and foremost. But, when you're a first-time starter, maybe you're a little nervous of, like, if somebody messes up at practice, do I want to be the guy to call him out, or should I let somebody else who's already done it call him out? Now with Arch, I think he's got the ability to call somebody out. I think he clearly is chirping. I think that's just a different version of Arch to where, okay, it feels like he has embraced being that leader, and hopefully that pays dividends in camp, but obviously more importantly when you're playing against other teams.
Yeah, you got to love hearing that it was he and Colin Simmons going at it. Like that's the duo. It's like, man, that's how you know the competitiveness is up. He said it was on a screenplay. Like, why were those two getting in on a screenplay? Probably because Simmons did something that Arch didn't like, and he got in his face about it. And I do think Arch said a lot last year about how he felt this need to earn being a leader on the team and being like he almost used his name as a weapon against himself to say, like, I can't be Arch Manning to these guys. I can't be a Manning because I haven't proved that I'm a Manning to them. Why would they get behind me there? And so I think that's kind of what led to some of those early season jitters, led to, Michael Taft needing to be his kind of buddy at the press conferences and being the leader. It's a different guy now. He's so much less timid. His breakouts at the start of camp, like that, just so much energy there. And yeah, you're confident when you're talking crap and your coach is noticing it. That's a good thing to hear about a quarterback. So any kind of confidence indicator, I'm all for. We saw it last year. I mean, he was the most just kind of stoic, strict to himself guy. And then he finally has a good game against Sam Houston. Maybe you shouldn't have flexed on a Sam Houston linebacker who's making $10 in NIL. But at the end of the day, like, Texas fans knew, like, all right, this is a good sign. It means that he's got some confidence there. And, if not for other people messing up that game, he had a really good game against Florida. Like, that was not his fault. And then it wasn't a great statistical game, but they had a really good game against Oklahoma the next week. Like, the season could have gone way different if that Florida game was better coached and he had the confidence of winning that game, winning an SEC away game, then going and winning Red River. Like, how much different are we talking about this program? And that's a lot of what ifs for 2026 when we're talking about this team. But it's really good to see Bucky. I'm glad to hear that Arch is really embracing this. I'm the quarterback one. I'm, at the end of the day, 101 quarterback in the draft. Like, that's who I am. I'm going to act that way.
Yeah, I love it. Look, he's always going to be the same guy he is to the press. I mean, he's very well trained. He's not going to give bulletin board material or say anything that's going to get him or his teammates in trouble. But yeah, it's clearly a different version of Arch Manning that we're seeing in practice. And His teammates are telling the whole story, and his coaches are telling the whole story. So that's great. He should be confident. Again, with the way he played, it's not just projection and hope with Arch Manning. We know what he's capable of doing. It goes without saying. He's got to be better earlier this time around. And I like, Evan, that it's Texas State in week 1. Like, I'd still be pretty confident if it was Ohio State in week 1 for the second straight season, because you get that game at home, and obviously this team's really talented, and Arch has a full season of starting experience under his belt. But getting that sort of tune-up game against Texas State, I know Ohio State gets one too, so it's not like the Longhorns have some sort of advantage there. But I'm hopeful that allows him and so many of these other guys to be playing with confidence going into that Ohio State matchup in week 2, because we all know how much is on the line there.
I'm right there with you. I would be concerned about a week 1 matchup. Ohio State was way more ready last year, and yes, Arch Manning was in his first career start. So was Julian Sand, and I think Ohio State was better prepared for their quarterback to be in the first career start. And at the end of the day, Ohio State didn't get much from Sand and Jeremiah Smith, and they still won that football game. But yeah, Texas getting that confidence tune-up game is going to be really nice. Colin Simmons is another player where, sometimes he just needs to kind of see the ball go through the hoop. And remember how long it kind of took him to get a sack? And then right after he got the sack, it was like, that's right, it's Colin Simmons. This guy's going to be a superstar. But it will be nice to see him get that sack in that first week and get his confidence going. Arch to Cam Coleman getting a deep shot going. It's going to feel really good for this team to come into the game with that. Whereas, Ohio State, they're going to have the same feeling about it. It's going to be nice for them to get there, forgetting exactly who they play week 1, but it's going to be nice for them to get their tune up for saying to find Jeremiah Smith. But the Longhorns getting it at home week 2 feels like so much of a different feeling than what we had last year with week 1 in Ohio State.
Hey, you're right. Colin Simmons really struggled out of the gate, and his biggest play against Ohio State was a 15-yard penalty that kept the Buckeyes drive alive, that led to one of their 2 touchdowns that they had. So, yeah, if he can also hit the ground running a little earlier this year, then goes without saying that will help the Longhorns tremendously. So, good stuff there. Plenty of Texas football conversation on the brain with Evan Vieth of Inside Texas. We'll give a couple more sponsor shout-outs and maybe see what else is on Evan's sports brain. I did see the Lakers just got sold to the former CEO of Disney, which we'll maybe talk about that and dive into a couple of other sports headlines for the final few minutes. Real quick, though, sponsor shout-out to Sleep Cycle Center, our guy, Dr. Chad. If you are having sleeping problems, and my sleep's getting worse as I get older, I might need to go see Dr. Chad in the not-too-distant future. Sleep Cycle Center, 2 Austin area locations, one up north, 183 and Breaker, the other in Lakeway off of 620. If you snore, if you have trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, if you're just tired throughout the day, stop drinking 10 cups of coffee. It's not good for you. Go get your sleep taken care of. SleepCycleCenters.com. State-of-the-art technology. It's not just CPAP. They have a number of different ways to make your sleeping problems disappear forever. Mention the show. You're going to get $100 off an at-home sleep study. And again, the consultation is absolutely free. SleepCycleCenters.com. And also some love to our guy, Adam, and his great team at Waterloo Printing and Graphics. If you have a business that needs merch, shirts, hats, koozies, stickers, posters, signs, whatever, reach out to Adam and his team at Waterloo. Based in Austin, they will get you what you need very, very quickly. Great products, great customer service. Adam's a great dude, listens every day, big Longhorn fan. Reach out to him, 512-300-9641, or you could shoot him a DM on Instagram at Waterloo Printing. And a quick shout out to Woods Comfort Systems as well, 512-842-5066, HVAC, and now they do plumbing. How about 70 years of service in Central Texas? Their reviews online are absolutely insane. Seriously, just Google it. Yeah, thank you, Kurt. Their ratings are absolutely insane, and they deserve to be. WoodsComfortSystems.com, 512-842-5066. Any HVAC issues, any plumbing problems, don't try to do that stuff yourself. You're going to hurt yourself, and you're going to hurt your home. Reach out to the experts at Woods Comfort Systems. All right, Evan, I feel bad. I know you always write and talk about Texas. I'm pigeonholing you as just a Texas guy. I know you're a big sports fan and you know a lot about a lot in the sports world. Anything else? We could get to the Lakers sale. We could get to something else. What's top of mind for you in the world of sports, maybe outside of the 40 acres right now?
I had this conversation with my buddies, but this is the worst time of the year for sports. This August might be the worst month of the year. Sorry to any August birthday people. My hair went crazy in the break there. Sorry to any August people, and I love the MLB. The MLB is probably my second favorite pro league, but especially I'm a Nats fan. Post deadline when they sell, like I'm just way less locked into the day to day of that. And football hasn't started yet. I'm not a golf guy, and I think golf's going on right now, but it's kind of a terrible month for sports. Like I'm just waiting for something to happen. But yeah, I do think the Lakers sale is probably the most interesting thing that's gone on, because I mean it's been in the Buss family for how long? I mean that's been the primary owners, and it does feel like, you know, the Lakers would never they never like change their style or aesthetic, but the biggest difference in one franchise in the NBA from like, you know, player to player and owner to owner, just the feel of it. It's so different now. The LeBron era is so officially over in one offseason where you're going over to Luka, new ownership. I'm surprised Pelinka still has a job, in all honesty, but it definitely feels like we are now in the Luka Doncic Lakers era, and it definitely stems the question, like, will Luka end up being one of the best athletes ever that never really gets the big accolade? That's what I think you're thinking about with the Lakers sell, is like, can they build a national title, an NBA championship team around Luka, and will that ever happen?
Yeah, my big question is, when will Luka go back to Dallas? That's what I'm worried about over here. But I think the two big storylines, for those who don't know, and some of y'all have commented this already, so I'm sure most of y'all have seen this, but this morning reported that the LA Lakers are being sold for $12.5 billion, which is a record-breaking price. Obviously, no surprise right there. And the Lakers did sell that. The Buss family did sell the Lakers last year for $10 billion. Sold him to a guy, Mark Walter, who purchased the controlling interest of the team from the Buss family last season. So the guy, I guess, 1 year in is like, well, LeBron's out, I'm out. Or he's like, wait, 10 mil, I can turn that into 12.5 bill, or sorry, 10 bill. I can turn that into 12.5 bill in 1 year. How about that for an ROI right there? Are you kidding me? That's insane. But that's the story. The money, obviously, that's what everyone's going to focus on. But one of the guys who bought the team is Bob Iger, who longtime Disney CEO, who no longer has that position, but he held that position 2 different times. So maybe it's not crazy that at some point he'll want it back. But think about how much the Lakers are already talked about on ESPN. And maybe it's a little different now that LeBron is gone. But now you got the CEO or former CEO of Disney. We're going to be watching 80 Lakers games on national television this year, Evan.
Yeah, remember they have the cap on who gets the how many national games you get, and the Sixers immediately got as many as possible there. And like I think Sixers-Lakers discourse is going to be the most unbearable thing, especially now that Knicks fans are, Philly and Boston fans are the worst, but when New York fans have their teams good, they get into that situation. So now you have Philly fans, they've got LeBron. Boston, they're still close enough to their title, they're still competitive enough that they talk a lot, and then the Knicks just got their title. So it's just going to be an annoying year of NBA talking heads, and just for, at the end of the day, the West is probably still going to have the title winner this year. And I know that it hasn't exactly been what we've thought it would be, right? It was like, oh, no way the Thunder don't win again. But I do think that's going to be the case, even though now the Eastern Conference is probably deeper than it's ever been, or at least since before I was born, the Eastern Conference is probably the deepest it's been.
It's definitely catching up, but I think you're right. I don't think Spurs fans care that much that they're not talked about. It felt like even in the Spurs dynasty with Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, they weren't the most talked about team in the league, and they were winning titles more frequently than anybody else was. But yeah, I still feel like the 2 favorites to win it all next year are San Antonio and Oklahoma City. I know neither of them won it this year, but like I would pick them as my top 2 sort of contenders right now in the entire league. And yet it feels like the Lakers and the Knicks and the Celtics and definitely Philadelphia, all of those teams are going to get more media coverage and have more nationally televised games next season. So just brace yourself for that. It was already bad.
Southwest, unless it's the 2 playing against each other.
You're right. That's just not huge medium. I mean, San Antonio technically is a huge market. It's a top 7 city in the country in terms of population, yet it doesn't get that big media market kind of flair that some of these other powerhouse cities technically do. And it's interesting. Yeah, Is August the worst sports month of the year? I always felt like it was July. This year we had the World Cup, which obviously helped.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Get us through the dog days. But like last year, Texas Ohio State was on August 30th. I mean, week 0 was like August 23rd, I guess. So why did nobody wants college football to end later, and yet it feels like we keep pushing it back and adding more so it ends later. Why do we have to wait until September 5th to watch Texas play? Could we not have moved everything up a week so August wasn't as unbearable this year?
I can't wait till they finally make they settle on whatever the playoffs going to be, and then they make the calendar change as a result, where we're not ending the season, in late January, and we're playing these week 0 games already. Like, just move everything up. I could care less about week 0. Make it. I saw someone propose this. Make it Army Navy, and that's it. They get one game to start the year. You start it with the rivalry game. You don't have to do their own separate week, because it doesn't make sense anymore for them to have their own separate week, after the season. So yeah, I'm all for that. And then let's get it. This should have been season starting a week earlier. Let's be real.
Well, buckle up for 76 team playoff. Get ready. That's careful what you wish for, Evan. Can't wait for them to be done. They're never going to be done with expansion. Never going to be done. All right, great stuff, man. Before we let you go for the day, I know we've been talking about Inside Texas a lot, but I want to give you the chance to tell all the Bucky and BK listeners, who I'm sure are familiar with your work, but just in case they're not, how can they find you personally, and how can they find everything that you guys have at Inside Texas?
Yeah, InsideTexas.com is where you'll find me on the On3 network. Inside Texas YouTube channel, I go on a lot. I think we're going live tonight, Wednesday night, so make sure you're checking that out if you got some time. And then at Evan Vieth is my Twitter. That's where you can find me. I keep saying this. I'm going to try to add more on my Instagrams and TikToks. That's also the same @ So if you follow me on there, you might get something before the season. Definitely during the season, I'm going to have more on that.
There we go. Evan, you're the man. Thanks so much for doing this, brother. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, man.
There you go. Y'all follow Evan, follow Inside Texas, and it'll be Rodney Rodriguez co-piloting with me tomorrow. So definitely tune back in for a Thursday show. But that'll do it for this one. Thanks to all of you people for tuning in, and thanks to all of our sponsors for making it happen. We will talk to y'all soon. Hook 'em.